Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Academy Anonymous podcast. We are tracking all the latest updates on the Oscar race, and of course, this is a big episode because we finally have Oscar nominations. Phase 1 officially came to a close last Thursday with the reveal. I am your host, Joseph.
And I'm Jules. And before we get started, just remember, as always, to check out our official website, framesandflicker.com, and our Twitter at Academy Anon. Both of those are listed on the cover art for the podcast. And we finally reached the peak of the mountain, so to speak. As we mentioned in the last episode, we feel like the funnest part of this Oscar season and predicting the eventual winners and nominees is predicting the nominees. That part
Absolutely
is the funnest part. After that, it just feels like we're kind of crawling towards the end.
Yeah.
And a lot of the winners are kind of obvious.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun when you're like choosing, when all year you're narrowing down a pool of hundreds of movies into what is essentially around 40, maybe mid 30s. Yeah. And you're sort of debating which are going to be those films. Now that we have the final list of 30, phase 2 enters, it's going to get, the stakes are a little higher for the people who made the cut and a lot of people who are waiting to see what the results are.
But I would say that the stakes are higher for the people who are actually nominated, but they're lower for everybody else.
Right. But at the same time, like I wonder how high the stakes are for a couple of movies that understand that the nomination was the win. So, for example, it was wonderful to see Train Dreams nominated. Is Train Dreams really expecting a win anywhere?
I don't know. I feel like, from our limited experience or, we've been in certain rooms, I feel like it's obvious that people, when they get nominated, there is this kind of, Judi Dench one time described it as, you're kind of like on cloud 9 for like a month. I think there's this, I'm gonna use the term delusion, but I don't mean that in an offensive manner. I mean that as in you're so enveloped in the moment that I think a big part of you is really understanding that you have a 1 in 5 chance to win. And that's not nothing.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people start approaching this big ceremony with serious,
you're right.
Thought as to, maybe I will win. Maybe I can win.
Yeah. I mean, as far as phase 2 goes, someone who was nominated made a commentary recently, I think within the last 5 years, about this idea where after you get nominated, you understand that, the odds aren't in your favor. No one is necessarily predicting you or calling you the front runner. And yet there's enough people in your inner circle, and enough circumstances around you where the possibility starts to creep into your mind little by little by little, so that no matter what, you sort of give yourself a fighting chance, and you wind up disappointed when you lose on the night of, which is kind of interesting because, logically it makes sense. You officially now have a 1 in 5 chance most of the time, unless you're Best Picture, it's a 1 in 5 chance, right? And so those are fighting odds, right? Mm-hmm. But I think everyone else who's sort of looking at it from the outside, who's not involved in that situation and is more removed from it, can sort of understand after these nominations. And the race is really between A and B, or there is no race. It's going to be a walk.
Right. But I also think there's, there was some conversation leading up to the nominations where Amanda Seyfried had said that the nomination is really the thing that's the important part, not the win. And then coupled that with a few things that, there was also a press release, or there was also some news that Melissa Leo had
going to say just that.
Yeah, that Melissa Leo had come out saying that the Oscar really didn't do much for her career. In fact, it did the opposite.
It was not good. Yeah, she said it was not good.
Right, exactly. And so, in a way, I just want to mention that the sort of, denouement that we're feeling, the high of trying to get as many predictions right. And then now we've got the nominees. Okay, well, this person will win and this movie will win, etc. It's less exciting. I understand what Amanda meant, because I firmly, wholeheartedly believe that in this whole Oscar season awards game, the nomination is the win.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that matters. It is the thing that people remember. It is sort of, now your name has to forever be branded with Academy Award nominee, et cetera, whoever you are. And, I feel like that's really the award, because in fact, there tends to be an antithetical sort of thing that happens when you do win. Your career kind of stalls.
Hmm.
You know, you don't propel and go to these newer heights. In fact, more often than not, your career just kind of stalls. Look at Adrian Brody. He was on top of the world,
Right.
last year around
Hmm.
this time, and we haven't heard from Adrian Brody since. You
Yeah.
know, and so, I do think there are people that buck the trend every now and then. Um, but like, for example, Jennifer Lawrence, but even her, at her peak, there was a moment that quickly came
Hmm.
where there was a denouement and there was, less work, less people were watching her movies, less excitement about the roles she was taking, the film she was taking. And in fact, I feel like she had to do a reset to kind of, revive her career in a way, as opposed to just coasting on, oh, well, I'm an Oscar winner. That's not
Right.
enough. Look at
Right.
Halle Berry. That's not enough.
Yeah.
Um, and so I really understand what Amanda means. I think she's absolutely 100% right. I wish more people would talk about it. And I think if more people embrace that, it would be, a healthy thing, because I think
Right.
less people would be coveting this Academy Award win, because it really means not that much.
Right.
It's this big parade, of, celebrations and whatnot. But it ultimately comes down to, well, you win the award and then what happens?
Yeah.
Not much.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's
I-
this weird, like, devoting the entire year to, see who's going to end up being on that podium. And then after that, just crickets.
Yeah. Like I was going to mention the Melissa Leo interview. She's a wonderful actor. And she is a very deserving winner for The Fighter, in my opinion. Even if she wasn't everyone's, personal choice. There's a sense of, like, the reality is, to a large degree, it's all downhill from here. Like, this is the top of the mountain. So
Right.
now there is no more mountain. So we can just
Right.
go down.
Right.
That's one way of looking at it. I mean, I like what you said. The nomination surpasses the win. A nomination is bigger and more important and more significant than a win. I don't know how many people are going to remember that Adrian Brody won twice. I'm gonna say something controversial, which is, and then there are actors who have never been nominated, may never be nominated, and that, I think, is also more significant than a win. So, for example, I think it's more important to be Glenn Close, an 8-time nominee, than Adrian Brody, a 2-time winner. I think
That's a good compare.
I think it's as important for Amanda Seyfried to be a 1-time nominee than for Adrian Brody to be a 2-time winner. And then I think there are the cases, and there are several, I think, throughout history, like Jeff Daniels, who is not a nominee, who may never be a
Which
nominee,
is crazy.
which is absolutely nuts. And he is a more accomplished actor than Adrian Brody.
Yeah.
He has a more enviable filmography, has been involved in a wider spectrum of projects. And I think at the end, fans and members of the industry and his peers, they have an admiration for him that maybe he doesn't have an Oscar, but that doesn't keep that from existing.
Right. But this, we've talked about this in previous episodes, the inconsistency of the Academy Awards, to have certain people have one nomination, a couple nominations, 5 nominations, and then you have a list of very talented actors
Right.
who don't even have one nomination just yet.
Right.
And they've had decades in the
Right.
industry. It's really, I don't know, it can't help but feel bittersweet.
Absolutely.
You look at the list of nominees, and I'm sure you're happy for many of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that people listening to us are fans of certain films and certain actors, and so you're happy for many of them. But when you take stock of the industry and how many people have yet to be recognized,
Yeah.
even once, and have
Yeah.
decades in this industry, it's kind of sad.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And some people are going to hide behind, there's some critics or some people who disagree with us are going to hide behind, well, it's really not about the actors, about the performance.
Oh, that's bullshit.
That's spin,
That's
it
bullshit.
really is spin. And there's a lot of, you can see some of that spin here this year. There's always, it's never just about the performance. Because if it was just about the performance, they would ban all campaigns, right?
Right.
And no one would even care about a narrative, and it would be such a secret ballot that nobody would attend any event or call out any movie they like or any colleague that they're supporting. You're not going to have Christopher Nolan interviewing Ryan Coogler or Iñárritu interviewing the Safdie brothers. So absolutely not. It's not just about the performance, and it's not just about the film. It is very much about the pageantry and the spectacle
100%.
and the circus of it, the narrative and the framing of it. So that has, everything to do with everything.
And also I want people to understand that this machine starts early.
Yeah.
These distribution companies, these production companies, they know what they've got.
Absolutely.
And they're already, they're already planning their awards coverage, their awards run, their awards campaign, all in the effort to get to a very particular goal. And everything that they do from inception to the end is calculated.
Yeah.
Calculated to reach a specific goal.
100%. Certain films are assigned that duty, and they're meant to carry them out. And sometimes it blow ups in their face.
Right. But also sometimes they surprise.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to tell you that Warner Brothers knew that weapons was going to be a thing.
Yeah. And I can't tell you that, the idea behind greenlighting Mad Max Fury Road was to score 10 Oscar nominations and be nominated for Best Picture.
Right. Exactly. So that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of cases, and dare I say most cases, the Marty Supreme, this started early,
mm-hmm.
not when it premiered or, not even, dare I say, some of these things start in pre-production.
Right.
You already know what you're aiming for when you're making the film.
They have everything to do with the green light, right?
100%.
Right.
And like you were saying, we're kind of philosophizing right now, but this is very interesting to me. It's so surreal. It's odd to have to have these huge and even small studios and production companies, distribution studios, kind of care so much about running this awards race and having an awards contender and getting to the end. And again, all of it is just pageantry. It's not even that maybe in the heyday you would, get a quote unquote Oscar bump in the box office, but the box office right now is on its, last legs.
Right.
So you can't even say that that's one of the big prizes at the end of the road. So it's all just to participate in the pageantry.
And at the same time, I'm not sure you can argue that it's for legacy, right, anymore. Because, what Warner Brothers gets, how many nominations between, I think, someone added them up, right? And it's leading all the studios by far.
Oh, no.
But, that has nothing to do with the fact that the shareholders, they're looking at the Netflix deal and saying, yeah, I think that's
100%.
the next move.
So
legacy feels like, again, that's more spin.
Yeah. So there's a part of this that feels just, it's just odd. Let's devote so much time and resources and energy to this pageantry, and then it's over. Okay, let's do it again. And what did you gain per se?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Maybe Warner Brothers is an exception because they've had such a tremendous year, but other film studios, the financial gain that they get from their Oscar movies doesn't really compare to the financial gains that they got from their bigger other, non-Oscar films.
Yeah. All the conglomerates, they're not necessarily seeing these Oscar movies as the engine that's gonna take their company into profitability, right? And then at the same time, Warner Brothers had a great year this year. They had an okay year last year because Dune really underperformed. Joker Folie Du blew up in their face. In every respect.
Speaking of Inception, that was made to be. So when something like that happened, that's why it's so newsworthy.
Yeah.
Because from Inception, it was made to be.
Right.
Joker 2 lands 20 nominations.
Exactly. But then it ebbs and flows because Searchlight had a great year because they had a complete unknown. And they had A Real Pain, and Movie had a really breakthrough year.
Oh, yeah.
And where were they this year? They're nowhere.
Nothing.
Nothing, right? Because they can't sustain all the resources dedicated to getting that, to sort of, climbing the mountain, quote unquote.
Yeah, but they don't have the infrastructure.
They don't have the
infrastructure. That Warner Brothers has.
Even Warner Brothers that has the infrastructure, they had a not a great year last year. Look at Universal, right? Universal last year was coming off the heels of Oppenheimer. They launched a massive campaign for that in 2003. They were able to surprise with Wicked in 2004 and in 24, right?
Yeah.
And get those 10 nominations. And this year, what happened?
Well, this year they said they were going to coast. They said we're gonna do everything for part one, but we're gonna split into two. That way we get, do half the work but get twice the rewards
and get twice the nominations. Yeah, we get twice the nominations,
and it blew up in their face.
It totally blew up in their face.
100%. It ebbs and flows, but all this stuff. I hope those who are listening aren't bored by these but they're very fascinating to me. You know what it is? It's like to devote so much of
Right.
yourself, of your time, of your energy
Right.
to this pageantry that really doesn't give you all that much.
Right.
It's in a way, all you want is to be welcomed into the room.
Right.
You know, I
Mhm.
feel like I could write a dissertation on this, and it would be pretty good. You know, you just want to be like human beings that just want to feel included. You
Right.
just want to be amongst the best,
Right.
quote unquote, you know, the best, you
Right.
know, whoever's in charge of labeling the best.
Right.
You know, because that's even odd in and of itself when we're
Mhm.
talking about art. It just, to me, it's always felt odd.
But I do think, you know, from our perspective, we speak on it and we analyze it and we participate with it in the sense that, you know, it is historical,
Mhm.
you know, nonetheless.
Right.
It does have an element that is worth dissecting
Mhm.
and analyzing for you know, writing the broader story of the
Mhm.
industry and the American industry. And I won't dismiss that the awards also have this ability or this they've had this position, right, in the industry and in culture, popular culture, where the film that they're tending to reward lately, and sometimes this happens, it depends, I think, on on the circumstances that we're living in, and right now we're living in pretty dire circumstances. So the movies that they're singling out and the movies that they ultimately give the win to, they're meant to reflect what the industry is in pursuit of,
Right.
right? Whether it's Oppenheimer or Nora, and this year it should very well be between Sinners or When Battle.
Right.
It's emblematic of where the industry hopes to go,
Right.
where the voters and members of the industry would want the industry to go.
Right.
And that's an interesting thing,
Right.
right? Because it's very different when you see, for example, in A Country for Old Men win, than when you see a Green Book win, and when you see the King's Speech win.
Right.
And like I said, I do think a lot of it has to do with the circumstances we're living in. The same thing with when A Country for Old Men wins in 2007. The circumstances in the U.S. were very different than they were
Mm-hmm.
when, you know, for example, President Obama was in the White House, and you had significant wins for films like 12 Years a Slave or Birdman, a lot of independent films. And so right now in the time we're living in, I do think that this is a moment for the industry to say, this is what cinema can say about what's going on right now. And
Right.
this is what part cinema will play in the history of the United States and of the country. I'm sorry, and of the world that is being written right now. This is the part that cinema will play,
Right.
will be recorded, you know, in the history books as.
Right. 100%. And so, you know, it's a weird feeling every time with the Academy Awards for us. And you were saying, you know, there are these merits to, you know, analyzing them, and also it's addictive.
Yeah.
You know, that's why there's a
Yeah.
lot of people playing this quote unquote game.
Yeah.
Because it's addictive to like have this Oscar history and to see the patterns and the threads and to try to guess, you know, what a group of people are going to be selecting as the best.
And to
You know-
hope that they celebrate a film that you believe
Right. Deserves a recognition.
deserves recognition, and that maybe you hope is where the industry is going to go.
Right.
Right.
Right. But it's never a good idea. You know, we've been burned in the past hard. You know, when we were younger, we were more naive, we were more idealistic. You know, it's never a good idea to attach whatever the Academy Awards labels as, you know, worthy of recognition as, you know, a profound say on whether that movie is actually worthy or not.
Mhm.
There are several films that did not get nominated, that would never have been nominated, are never going to be nominated,
Mhm.
that are never going
Oh,
to be
yeah.
nominated, that are you know, equal, that are as potent and impactful as the ones that did, or in some cases even more so.
Yeah. 100%.
You know, so yeah, you know, we were young, we would have that Oscar nomination day, and sometimes it was a real heartbreaker
Yeah.
because, like I said, there's so much about this that is not about the art.
Right.
It's about who's in your corner,
Mhm.
who are the people propping you up. If you're fortunate enough to have certain resources, and other films and other artists and other performances and other filmmakers don't have those resources.
Right.
So they don't get to shine in those platforms.
Right.
You know, and I think, you know, as you do this long enough, you realize, you know, yeah, it's always a mixed bag.
Yeah. I agree.
Oh, so before we get into the nominations, we'll just say that, you know, this was posted on our Twitter, but we ranked number 47
Yeah.
on Gold Derby, which is not bad. I mean, our goal was to be top 10, top 20. You know, we have never gotten to top 10, top 20, but that's our big goal. I'm glad that we're in the top 50. And we
cracked the top 50, which was nice.
Right, we got 100 right out of 125 categories. Certainly when you're hearing the nominees being read out, you're kicking yourself thinking, why didn't I go, my God? And why didn't I think about this a little bit harder? And then there are other nominations that you would never have. I would never have put Avatar for costume design. No one in this universe
whoever got Avatar for costume design deserves the trophy. Let's give 100%. Them the trophy.
They deserve the Oscar. And so, so I don't kick myself about that.
Right.
But we'll talk about it, but it's like, damn, why didn't I listen to my gut, or why didn't I, take seriously what Joseph said the other day?
But there are certain things that we were sort of sniffing out that ended up,
100%. And you kind of want bragging rights. You kind of want, you feel vindicated, so, and we'll be talking about that. But Darwin Lindo, hello, we talked about it. People being surprised about the Ariana Grande snub. We talked about that. Films that were gonna underperform and they actually performed better.
Yeah.
We talked about that. And so, kind of, you want that ability to say, well, I said that, very few people were saying that.
Mm-hmm.
But well, whatever. The point is 47, not too bad, considering that there was a total group of 10,776.
Right.
So we were number 47 out of about 10,800 people.
And I will say,
which I think that's the top 0.05%, I think.
And I will say, I haven't gone and looked at the numbers or anything, but our 47th spot comes with a bunch of points, I think 80,000 points or something.
Yeah.
Which I will say is obviously not important, although it helped us rank.
I think it should be more important. It should be more important.
It helped us rank on the higher end of all the individuals that tied for 100 out of 125. But I will also say that it illustrates that we were pretty early on some of these contenders,
100%. Which because if we hadn't been early, we wouldn't be getting 80,000, because we got that 80,000 because we had a lot of really
strong hunches,
big contenders that made it to the end, and we got them early at 100 to 1.
Yeah.
Rose Byrne, we got her at 100 to 1 people.
Yeah.
Ever since we saw the film at Sundance.
Benicio del Toro,
Benicio del Toro, before he became oh my God, Benicio del Toro is winning every precursor, every critics group, we had him at 100 to 1.
Right.
Before people started thinking about Frankenstein for sound design, we had that 100 to 1. So, we had Train Dreams and Best Picture 100 to 1.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're right. I am very, actually, I think I'm more happy about that than the 47, but I wish that counted for more. I mean, don't you think? It's not fair.
It would be great if you get a couple of bonus points for that, but at least it helps in the tiebreaker. So we did rank 47th because of that. If we had gotten less points, we might have gotten a little bit lower. But I do think I like to mention that because I think that's an aspect that I always keep track of.
100%.
So let's start going through the nominees so we can post our reaction. So this is our Oscar nominations post-mortem. We'll go through the nominees. We have the benefit now of having some additional nominations come out, including the British Academy, which was absent. So it did not play a factor in our ability to predict who the Oscar nominees were. Looking at the nominees today, we can see that there were some important hints, maybe, that
100%
could have helped a lot of people.
If the BAFTA had come out with enough time before the Oscars, we would have gotten more right.
Yeah, we would. I think it would have tipped off a lot more people in terms of what the potential were for surprises
and snubs.
And again, hats off to anyone who was able to pick up on the surprises. Even without that.
Yeah.
And then we'll also mention where we went a little bit astray, what we got right.
But let's start with, before we get into the bigger categories, let's start with the ghettoized categories.
Well, I was going to say, before we do that, because as we'll go through the categories, maybe it gets a little bit washed out. But I think the big headlines were Warner Brothers gets 16 nominations for Sinners. That's a new record.
Yes.
A new record. And then
the record was 14, and Sinners didn't just break it by getting 15. It broke it by getting 16.
And it ended up getting 2 categories that you and I left it out of. Other people were predicting it. But I don't think I think it got nominated for essentially everything it could have gotten nominated for.
Yeah.
The one thing missing, sadly, was Miles Caden for the second song nomination, maybe. But it was a spectacular day for Sinners. But then Warner Brothers then gets the second most nominations,
13,
for one battle after another.
Right. Well, I will say that we predicted that correctly, because we predicted that one battle would get 13.
Right.
And we predicted that Sinners would get 14.
Yeah. That said, we were missing one battle character, one battle category that kind of swapped at the end of very surprising to us. But so then that's a massive headline, right? And they also get Weapons In with just one. So between those two, between those three films, they walk out with 30 nominations, which is, I think, really, really impressive. I have to go and research if it's unheard of potentially. It certainly reminds me of the Miramax series where they dominated with, remember The Hours and Gangs of New York and Frida and Chicago. And so it's a really impressive haul. And they definitely broke some of their own records that we thought they were not going to be able to accomplish earlier this year.
Right. And I also say that it's really, and people have mentioned it online, it's ironic. It's ironic that it has such a historic year, when we're contemplating, selling to Netflix.
Yeah. I as they're battling, how much they're going to get paid to share, the board members, or the shareholders, excuse me, this is what the voters had to say about it. Other big headline I think that's worth mentioning is that Wicked goes 0.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that. I want to say that I think very few, maybe nobody predicted that Wicked would get 0, but Academy Anonymous was one of the very, very, very few outlets that even contemplated it for the lowest number, I think 3. I don't think anyone had it below 3.
We were being very, very aggressive with our push for this film gets 3, and that's
at
the
most.
That's the top.
And like I said, I don't know how many people got. I don't think anyone got 0 based on Gold Derby at least.
Right.
But I would find it hard to believe that there were a ton of people that got anything lower than 3.
Right.
And I want to say that maybe we were amongst the only people
who
predicted it for 3.
And I'm going to, shout out, and we'll go through the categories. You wanted to be even more aggressive.
Yeah, I thought too.
Now, we had seen the movie, and we had already, after screening it for the first time, despite all the, spin that was occurring, we had a gut feeling that the prospects were not going to be very good or very bright. That ended up coming to fruition in the most extreme way. 0 nominations. I thought, to me, that was one of the biggest headlines of the day. So I thought that was interesting. And the last thing that I think is worth mentioning is that despite all the theories among individuals who were tracking the race, ourselves included, it was not necessarily the most international of Oscars, and it did not take a violent shove into becoming the most global Oscars ever. I do think there's a step forward, but it is very much a step forward that's in keeping with their usual sort of trajectory.
I will say I agree. I think that they resisted.
I think
they resisted being
Yeah, we saw that pushback that first became evident through the guilds. We certainly, I think, saw that appear. And there was I hesitate to say that there was anything incredibly egregiously shut out, but nothing did as well as some had expected, maybe as some had hoped, as some had predicted, ourselves included again.
Foreign films, you mean?
In terms of international films.
Well, I actually think that there was one international film that did spectacularly.
But I
think every other international film, and that one was poised to quote unquote do terribly,
right?
Until it won a whole bunch of shit at the European Film Awards.
I to be fair, I want to say that international film was the one with the broadest appeal of the bunch. It was the one that won a bunch of awards at the European Film Awards, as you said. It to me, it doing well is not necessarily a huge step forward. To me, the narrative or the idea this year was, well, how many foreign films or international films can break into how many categories? So it became, to me, the story of, can the Neon 5 dominate the foreign film? Spoiler alert, they cannot, because they didn't get all 5 spots. And furthermore, can the Neon 5 break into a bunch of other major Oscar categories, and can they almost own half the list of Best Picture?
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, they did not.
Yeah.
They could not.
Especially when we get to Best Picture, we saw that voters were, as we've been saying, hesitant to include more than 2 movies from a studio.
Yeah.
So instead of, welcoming welcoming more foreign films from the same studio, and instead of including, surprises from different studios like, Sony Picture Classics, Blue Moon, they said, we'll go with, 2 Focus, 2 Netflix, 2 Neon,
Absolutely.
And so in a way, I don't know, there was some excitement to possibly having the most global Academy Awards.
I was certainly excited about it.
I
because a
think
lot
that
of
would
them
have
were
been
very
really
worthy
cool.
films.
And then, we have some movies that made it in that are highly questionable.
Yeah.
That people have had some issues.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So let's start breaking down these categories. And why don't we start with what is usually the trickiest?
We'll also say the ghettoized categories.
The ghettoized categories of the Academy. Some of the best films from all the nominees are in these categories. I will say that. So if you have an opportunity to watch them, please do. The ones that we've seen are just wonderful.
So let's start with documentary short film, which I thought was particularly very strong list of a short list.
Yes, it was.
The nominees were All the Empty Rooms, Armed with Only a Camera, The Life and Death of Brent Renaud, Children No More, Were and Are Gone, The Devil is Busy, and Perfectly Estrangedness.
So a couple of interesting things to me here is, number one, Geeta gets her first nomination here, and she will end up getting a double nomination on the announcements.
The filmmaker behind The Devil is Busy, she's a co-director, and she directed The Perfect Neighbor.
I think
we met her. Yeah. We met her this year.
Yeah, and she's absolutely wonderful and made 2 great films. So it's great to see her double nominated. Question going forward will be, does that become a factor in her ability to in the ability of The Perfect Neighbor to win documentary feature? That's going to be interesting. Yeah. All the Empty Rooms here was expected. Armed with Only a Camera expected. Interesting thing about this category is that I believe The New Yorker scored 3 mentions in the long list, failed to get a nomination. And The New Yorker tends to do well here. Children No More.
We had great odds and we lost
had fantastic odds. We backed that at the end. Sheila Nevins is on that. It's a great documentary. Perfectly Estrangedness, we had our doubts because is it too artistic?
Is it too experimental?
This went to Cannes.
We talked about, it's, just, to go over it again, it's just some donkeys that are like in a
but it's like I heard. So what we haven't had the opportunity to see it yet. We look forward to seeing it, but we heard it's one of the most visual documentary shorts on the list. So it was sort of great to see, I think.
Oh yeah, it was awesome, but I didn't think that they would go for something that experimental.
I agree, but it's a very eclectic list with a lot of commentary on pertinent issues in the country, in the world. So again, this list is a killer. I think we ended up going 3.
Yeah, we got All the Empty Rooms, Armed with Only a Camera, and The Devil is Busy, as did most people. Most people got those right.
Yeah.
I wish we had stuck to our guns and kept Children No More.
We had a debate about it.
Yeah.
All right.
For animated short film,
we did well here. We did
actually really well here.
Yeah.
We got 4 right.
Thanks to some last minute changes.
The nominees were Butterfly, Forever Green, The Girl Who Cried Pearls, Retirement Plan, and The Three Sisters. I think no one got The Three Sisters minus maybe Ann Thompson.
Ann Thompson got it, and I gotta say, I'm absolutely shocked to see The Three Sisters there. We spoke on it a little bit, I think, when we predicted it. When we were predicting this category. If you want to check out that episode back before the nominations were announced. But the idea here for this short is that the filmmaker was responsible for a couple of films that have been nominated in this category before, including We Can't Live Without Cosmos. Is a Russian filmmaker, Russian animator. But he did this experiment where he made this short film and started submitting it to festivals under a pseudonym, under a different name, supposedly under the pretext of he wanted the film to be judged solely for the film and not for the filmmaker. And he sort of disclosed what an arduous journey it was, and that he was surprised how many times he got rejected. But lo and behold, at least one festival welcomed the film, and it was an Oscar qualifying festival, got himself onto the long list, revealed that story pretty late, and I thought that would be the Achilles heel for this film and that it would keep it from being nominated. its nomination really surprises me because I almost thought that that sort of experiment many voters would have found distasteful. Now, I don't know how many of them actually know about that story. I don't know if they're going to feel differently now. Now the story may, become more popular and may catch on, or I don't know how many of them were taking that opportunity to nominate the film as sort of an antithesis to what the filmmaker was sort of saying was his experience.
Right. And, I think that's a fascinating story. And it proved to be, I think, more of an asset than anything else. That narrative might have helped.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, another interesting thing about this category, the New Yorker makes it in for retirement plan, which is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
Big hit from South by Southwest. Forever Green was the Bear animated short to make it in.
You were right.
A lot of people
Thought it was going to be
Snow Bear.
This is number one on Gold Derby.
Which you've seen, and it's a very enjoyable film. But that we sort of pegged Snow Bear as maybe being the weaker. We had another debate, like how much bear can we have in this category, and I think we ended up siding for Forever Green because of the more unique aesthetic, but also because the idea that a lot of people gave Snow Bear an advantage, and this is again sort of the opposite of our experience with the three sisters from the Russian animator, Konstantin. A lot of people gave Snow Bear the advantage because it was coming from the Academy Award nominated filmmaker of Brother Bear.
Yeah.
And we sort of said, well, can they really nominate him again for another Bear?
Yeah.
Or is that going to be a detriment? And we sided on the detriment side. And the other thing was that, from our research, into like the voting pattern recently, it's kind of shown that if you're a filmmaker with a little bit more exposure to the industry and let alone, a nomination at the Oscars, it's going to be a little bit harder to get this nomination in a short category.
Right. 100%. It's interesting because moving on to live action short, I would say it's the antithesis, the exact opposite of what happened to us in animated short film, because we got only 2 right. It was our worst category for these short films. And yet we've seen 4 of the 5 nominees.
We did.
How unfair is that?
We did.
How freaking unfair. So we have seen 4 of the 5. The only one we're missing is Butcher Stain.
Right.
But we failed to predict 2 of those. So we only got 2 right.
That said, again, it was a close call for us. So we've been on the singers ever since we've seen it.
The nominees are Butcher Stain, A Friend of Dorothy, Jane Austen's period drama, The Singers, and 2 People Exchanging Saliva. We've seen A Friend of Dorothy, Jane Austen's period drama, The Singers, and two People Exchanging Saliva. We have not seen Butcher Stain.
So we were early on The Singers. After having seen it, we were really impressed with it.
It's freaking amazing. My favorite short of the year.
Great to see it there. We were one of the earlier ones to predict it. It got a little bit of traction at the end. Some more notable people also predicted it. That said, I think maybe the big giveaway for some people was that Netflix bought it right before nominations, but yet it was not a favorite among the 5.
No, it wasn't.
2 People Exchanging Saliva, we had debates over because we said, is there really enough room in this list for both 2 People Exchanging Saliva and The Singers?
Yeah.
They're
they're both playing with form.
Yes.
And they're playing with, the way the shorts are conceptualized.
Right. And very idiosyncratic films that have strong directorial visions. We were very impressed with both of them, but we did debate, can you really put them both on the list? I mean, we go to the short film Oscar shortcase, whatever.
And there's some
and there are some, there's some choices on there. There are some choices. But so we were happy to see that. We had another debate, Jane Austen's period drama.
Yeah,
I've been high on this all year.
Joseph was saying, listen, do not overlook this short. I saw it. It's charming. I like it enough. I thought it would be a little bit, I don't know, a little bit green, a little bit rough around the edges for the Academy. And it wasn't. Apparently,
I enjoy the film immensely, and I think it's quite sharp. And I thought, if I know my Academy, like I think I know my Academy, this film will be listed. And lo and behold, it was listed.
Yeah.
Happy for them, but also it makes sense to see it here because they like.
Yeah.
I think they like it. I told you, what this gives me vibes of is, was it Lucas in Love or George Lucas in Love? Remember the one that sort of plays on George Lucas Star Wars.
Yeah.
And Shakespeare in Love. And to me, I told you, they're really going to love this.
Yeah.
Because it's as much about, the Jane Austen cinematic universe as it is about actual Jane Austen, right? So that was happy to see that. A Friend of Dorothy.
We pegged that the sort of short featuring a known actor was going to be a do.
Yeah.
There usually is one included at least,
Mm-hmm.
even if the short is not that great. And
Right.
usually, in our experience, the shorts that have a known lead are the weakest.
Yeah, I agree.
And so it was really between A Friend of Dorothy or a do.
Right.
And Jennifer Lewis is in that in a do. I
Right.
heard she gives a very good performance. And we thought, you know, based on what the issues there, school shooting,
Mhm.
that might be it. And, you know, I actually like A Friend of Dorothy. It's
Yeah.
really sweet.
Yeah.
You know, it's not breaking new ground, but, you know, I was touched.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised that it's here because it reminds me of a bunch of shorts that sort of come from the UK that feature, you know, well-established actors from the UK. This one featuring Miriam Margolyes, but also Stephen Fry. So it makes sense to see it on this list. Again, I think one of our debates was, is there enough space for the comedy of A Friend of Dorothy and Jane Austen's
Mhm.
period drama? And
Yeah.
so we sort of said, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And you know, and it ended up being that there was enough
Yeah,
space.
there was.
And then Butcher Stain, interestingly enough, is possibly the most dramatic short as far as we know. We haven't seen this one yet. But some commentators were pegging it to get nominated. So that's good to see it here. I think it's also very timely with everything that was going on with Gaza, and sort of interesting that you see Gaza, or the theme of everything that was going on with Gaza, sort of show up in documentary short and in live action short.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was interesting. I will say, to me, this is one of the stronger batch of films nominated for live action short film, and
Yes.
it's great to see a lot of these filmmakers listed.
Yes. Moving on to documentary, the other three ghettoized categories, which, you know, a select group in the international feature got to break out, you know, at least to some extent. I'm still waiting for the documentary that would be nominated for Best Picture.
or a craft category.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. And so for documentary feature, I think a lot of people did bad in this category. A lot of people, but luckily we only got two wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
This was a tricky category.
It was
I will
tricky,
say
but
that.
I spent a lot of time, guys,
Mhm.
thinking about this category.
You
and
did.
thinking because this category is made to have upsets
Mhm.
and snub favorites,
Mhm.
and so I really was.
It did.
I put myself the task of finding out exactly who's going to get snubbed and who isn't, and I was right on some, but not on others.
Right.
So the nominees were the Alabama Solution, Come See Me in the Good Light, Cutting Through Rocks, Mr. Nobody Against Putin, and The Perfect Neighbor. Now, I will say that the ones that were not heavily predicted were Come See Me in the Good Light, which was a favorite out of Sundance,
Mhm.
Cutting Through Rocks, which you and I called. And
Yeah.
I'm very happy
right out
about
of
that.
Sundance.
We were very happy about that. And Mr. Nobody Against Putin, which you and I also called.
It's sort of fascinating because we've been high on Mr. Nobody Against Putin since Sundance. We thought it would be shortlisted for international film along with documentary film. It was the official selection from Denmark. But everything that's happened with Greenland over the past few weeks, I think that has really elevated the profile of the movie. And by the time that was happening, the international film long list was long gone, so it had missed that opportunity. But it really picked up a lot of steam in this race.
Right.
And so you and I are not surprised at the end that it was able to crack the 5. And we're having sort of discussions right now of what is the ceiling, and we're certainly seeing a path where it could actually end up winning this
Right.
prize.
Right. And I will say you and I called, and I'm very happy about it, that there was going to be a snub for 2,000 meters to Andreevka,
Yes.
which was number 1 on Gold Derby.
Again, that's kind of like a Snow Bear thing where
Yeah.
like I think you're betting on consensus
Yeah.
and looking at the details.
Yeah. You know, just simply put, it's too soon to nominate him again.
Right.
He just won.
Right.
And I think that is something else that went against someone out. Another documentary I thought was going to have a good chance, which was Apocalypse in the Tropics. But even that was too soon.
Mm-hmm.
They did not welcome her despite her doing well at the IDA,
Right.
that filmmaker. And so, you know, I think it's a really cool list.
Again, we had
I'm
debates
happy
here.
to see Come See Me in the Good Light. It's
Right.
not typically what they go for.
I was really surprised because they tend to overlook these more personal documentaries, these more intimate portraits of these usually artists. And so it was great to see it there. Ryan White has been snubbed before, so not a lot of people predicted this. It's great to see it there. Interesting things to happen where, Netflix was not able to get to, even though people were easily pegging Perfect
Up.
Neighbor to get in with Cover Up and Laura Poitras. Plan B couldn't get in for either Apocalypse in the Tropics or Cover Up.
Yeah.
So I think it's an eclectic group, right? There's a lot of movies that touch on issues going on in the U.S., issues going on internationally, have multiple perspectives. You even have something intimate, very intimate, like Come See Me in the Good Light.
It's a cool list.
I think it's a very good list. Yeah. The win, I think, is going to get interesting. But yeah, I think a lot of people, I'd be surprised if a lot of people got more than 3 right here.
Okay, and then moving on to animated feature film, everyone got this right. It was the favorite 5.
Yes.
So the nominees were Arco, Elio, K-pop Demon Hunters, Little Amelie, or the character of Rain, and Zootopia 2.
So this was I think it was largely predicted, but I think there was a chance that the Bad Guys 2 could muster up some late momentum with mentions at, the Visual Effects Society, the Annie Awards. Didn't come to pass. I think one of the more interesting things here is that Elio manages to get nominated. And I think pretty objectively, it was not the success story that the studio wanted or that the industry needed. So it's kind of interesting to see that it's still finished out among the top 5. I think looking at, for example, the BAFTA list, it was interesting because Arco did miss the cut for international film.
But
and
made it for children's film.
It made it for children's film, but Little Amelie made it for animated film. And so I had some skepticism as to if there was enough room for Arco and Little Amelie. Maybe they were going to include another major U.S. studio, another populist film, another children's film, another family film, but that did not necessarily come to pass. So Arco and Little Amelie, that's great to see. Yeah.
Okay, and now moving on to probably the biggest category of the ghettoized categories, which is international film, which again seemed poised to make a big dent in the American Academy Awards.
It did not come to pass, unfortunately. They got some pushback.
Right.
And
so the nominees were It Was Just an Accident from France, The Secret Agent from Brazil, Sentimental Value from Norway, Surat from Spain, and The Voice of Hin Rajab from Tunisia. Now, I will say 4 of the 5 are favorites. The Voice of Hin Rajab was sitting at number 6 at Gold Derby.
And
but
some people,
you and I had those 5 from months ago.
So yeah, we've been on those 5 for a while.
You and I felt very certain that, and if you listen to the podcast, you'll see we felt very certain that No Other Choice was going to be blanked.
Yeah.
And not get nominated anywhere.
I think we were a little bit late on Surat, but we hadn't seen it yet. At the same time, once those long lists came out, we understood that Surat was going to be a major contender here. But some major pundits started siding with Voice of Hin Rajab towards the end. This is the 2nd nomination, I believe, for Tunisia, which is great. Olivier Lachey made it in for Spain. Brazil's coming off a win for
I'm Still Here.
I'm Still Here, which could make this interesting because obviously the story will become, as we continue diving into these nominees, where It Was Just an Accident was overlooked.
Yes,
Sentimental Value at the same time got 9, so it'll be interesting to see what the winner is among those 3. Jafar Panahi gets the nomination here finally. No Neon 5, as we had predicted long ago. Venice winner still in here. It's an interesting list, and I think it's actually been a while since we've had a female filmmaker included here, so it's great to see Katrin Banhania here. It's also the BAFTA 5. So again, had maybe the BAFTA announced a little bit
everyone
earlier,
would have put The Voice of Hin Rajab.
Everyone would have put The Voice of Hin Rajab.
But we had it at the best odds.
Right. And again, No Other Choice, I think certainly is set back by some of the controversy that came out. That's at least what I believe.
I agree. Moving on to visual effects, the nominees were Avatar, Fire and Ash, F1, Jurassic World, Rebirth, The Lost Bus, and Sinners. Now, Avatar, F1, and Sinners were favorites. Oh, no, actually, no, Avatar and F1 were favorites, period.
Right.
Frankenstein was a favorite, but you and I were very cold on Frankenstein.
Really odd.
We're very unlikely to get that visual effects nomination. Sinners was sitting at number 6, I believe, and we didn't think that they'd go for it.
Right.
And they did.
I mean, at least it got the Visual Effects Society nomination for supporting effects. We thought that the shutout for Frankenstein at the Visual Effects Society would be
Telling.
really detrimental, and it was. The Lost Bus picked up steam of all those nominations, and we said they have a pattern of, rewarding more serious-minded films, films inspired by history, disaster films inspired by history.
We called that one early, but I will say we were very high on Jurassic World Rebirth at the beginning, and then we saw it.
Yeah, we finally got a look at it, and then we said, we're not impressed.
Right.
And then we said, what is the alien from Prometheus doing on Jurassic World?
Right, and so that compelled us to move it down and out of our list.
Yeah.
However, we were wrong to, because your initial hunch was that they like films by this filmmaker.
Gareth Edwards. I thought
he's been in this category before.
Yeah, he was here for Rogue One, which they liked a lot, and he was here for The Creator, which they liked a lot. And I think he has a strong reputation amongst members of this branch. And they were impressed with Jurassic World Rebirth. There was some reporting out of the Bake Off that it had a really good reel, so maybe that made the difference. I couldn't see it in the movie. Yeah, I couldn't see the reel in the movie. I just saw the movie. But sort of, I think an interesting note here, Superman was a massive box office success in the US.
Massive snubby.
And it was it's so shocking to not see it on this list.
Yeah. Also missing a Gold Derby favorite from people now who might say otherwise. Wicked, was a favorite to get at least 5 nominations, which I think is unheard of for a movie that's not even going to get nominated for Best Picture.
Right.
It misses, and I think it was pretty easy to tell that it was going to miss visual effects.
I mean, we sort of saw it and sort of had the argument of I'm not sure that after it squeaked in with last year, I'm not sure it's going to be able to squeak in again.
100%.
Yeah, and then I thought maybe Tron Ares, which was very visual effects heavy and had the Jared Leto factor, might break in here, but no. That said, I think this category is going to be a walk in phase 2.
100%. Let's move on to Best Sound, which most people got right, because I think Surratt kind of landed in the top 5 by the end. And as you were saying, in international film, Surratt did have a pretty good day, because for a film like Surratt to get sound, it's still a big deal.
I mean,
but I want to say that it fell below the expectations that you and I had, because we thought it would be a minimum 5 nominee film. And I will say that there were good reasons behind it. It did well in the short lists. People I know, filmmakers who were incredibly passionate about it. And we said, listen, if it gets nominated for sound design, the amount of foreign films that get nominated for sound design and do not get nominated for Best Picture is
very, very few.
Maybe none.
We couldn't find very many, at least. So we thought it would be a great hint as to where Surratt would fall. That's
but I will
not
say,
the case.
I will say that at the end of the day, we predicted Surratt for 5 nominations and only got 2.
It only got 2.
And
this is the other nomination it got besides international film.
I will say that, going to sleep that night, I was thinking 5 is a bit much. Maybe not 5, 4.
Well,
and that we were wrong at least in 1. I didn't think we were going to be wrong in 3.
I will say I foregrounded it saying as we're going to have a little bit of a battle between, and it's a joke, a battle between the car movies. And voters are really either going to love Surratt or they're going to love F1. And I actually think, as heartbreaking as it is, that did come to play.
Yeah.
It just very much fell in line for the more conventional American film.
100%.
That said, I do think...
I think it would have been, and we'll talk about it maybe, but it would have been too cool for the Academy to nominate Surratt for Best Picture. We should have clocked that. You know,
but I will say that, like, among the international films to break into this category, Surratt is really unique.
Mm-hmm.
This is not A Quiet on the Western Front. This is not Emilia Perez. This is a hardcore, uncompromising art house film that's multicultural and abstract and difficult to watch. And so its inclusion here is fantastic.
Oh, fantastic.
It just speaks to good work will win out.
100%.
I believe it's an all-female sound team, which is also great.
I think that's also historic.
It might be. The other thing I was going to say is I'm not sure Neon has had much traction in this race before, so that's a win for Neon, right? They don't get everything, but this is an inch in the right direction, I think, for international films. For Neon, so that's the silver lining here. I will say we did not have the Cinema Audio Society to predict this. where at the Cinema Honor Society, Avatar was snubbed yet again.
Yeah.
We sort of rode the idea that it not showing up at the motion picture sound editors was terrible, and so we kept it off. And so Avatar capped its nominations with visual effects. Excuse me.
There's one more.
There is one more nomination coming up for Avatar
that nobody saw coming.
Which again, give this individual the Oscar, whoever was able to predict this nomination for Avatar. But yes, Avatar was missing from this category as a favorite. Of course, Wicked was missing. We had called that already. That was going to have a tough time. Frankenstein made it in as we had thought.
Right. For Best Original Score, this one was tough because I was really kicking myself because
I was kicking you too. Yeah.
You said it all along.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph said it over and over and over again. He said Begonia is going to get nominated for original score.
It makes the most sense, yeah.
And the nominees were Begonia, Frankenstein, Hamnet, One Bad After Another, and Sinners. And me thinking that Jerskin Fendrix had just been nominated for Poor Things, another Yorgos film.
Isn't that the most known of composers?
Right. Why would they nominate him again so soon? Initially, we predicted, you were thinking Begonia as the veteran spot in the list.
Right.
You know, because we were kind of slim pickings between that, possibly F1, correct?
Right. I mean, I think that what really
or one of the veterans in the spot.
Yeah, I think what really broke it for me for Begonia was that I wanted someone on the list that was not going to be a Best Picture nominee. And again, so here's the caveat: is I was right. You know, Begonia broke into the category. I was wrong. Begonia is very much a Best Picture nominee, so people should know it's not very often that you're going to get all 5 original score nominees from Best Picture nominees.
100%.
And so this is...
We kept looking and we said, we're not seeing it.
Couldn't find too many.
And I apologize. It wasn't that you said there was a veteran on the list. It was that you know, a film from it shouldn't be 5 from Best Picture.
I wanted a Best Picture outlier on this list that did not come into fruition. So I do think that's interesting is that, you know, this is one of the few times in history, I think we had to go back to like when the category was split and there was 10 nominees. One of the few times in history where all 5 score nominees are Best Picture nominees.
As odd as that sounds.
Yeah, and so we toyed around with F1, which is also a Best Picture nominee. We toyed around with Sarat, which we predicted for Best Picture at the end. And then I think we toyed around with Marty, but we were kind of bullish on Marty not getting in.
We felt surprisingly confident that Marty Supreme would not get nominated for score. It did not get nominated. It was a favorite to get nominated here.
Right. And it doesn't show up. And I will say that at the BAFTA, right, the 5 repeat. And so it may have been a tip-off had we had the BAFTA
100%.
that Marty was not going to make that cut.
Everyone would have taken Marty out.
Exactly.
And you and I, at least I would have bought more your argument of
Begonia. And then they also, of course, did not nominate Sarat, but Sarat did not make the long list, I believe, because BAFTA was not crazy about Sarat.
Right. Moving on to original song, you know, there was 2 big surprises in this category. And I think this was the moment. Well, first I'll read the nominees. The nominees are Dear Me from Diane Warren, Relentless, yet another nomination. Golden from K-Pop Demon Hunters, I Lie to You from Sinners, Sweet Dreams of Joy from Viva Verdi, and Train Dreams from Train Dreams. Okay, so this was, I think, the moment where I think everyone understood, shit. Wicked is going to get blanked.
I thought you were going to say, oh shit, Diane Warren is never going to get snubbed.
You're right, and that too. So
that's what Wicked needed is some Diane Warren.
They would not have dared to snub Diane Warren, even in Wicked.
Yeah.
So no freaking Wicked. And this was like one of the categories where I would have bet my life that it was going to get nominated for song here.
After Avatar, I will say that whoever predicted like a 0 day for Wicked, you know, mad respect to that individual.
No, I don't think anybody did that.
Even at our most
like I said, we were one of the few people that were most aggressive.
We would not have bet a year ago that Wicked would go from 10 nominations to 0. It would have to have been, you know, a huge clunker that only made like... It would have to be Joker. It would have to be Joker Folia, dude.
Right.
You know, the idea that Wicked makes as much money as it does and is, you know, as critically marginal as it is compared to Joker Folia do, and they have the same amount of nominations. That says a lot, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So again, you're right. When it misses its nomination here, that's massive.
I think when you start, you know, it starts dawning on you that a film goes from 10 to 0, and again, anyone that was predicting 4, 5, 6 was nuts, in my opinion.
Right.
But it goes to show you, and I asked you, Joseph, when this was done, the nominees were revealed, is it a statement? And I feel like it was a statement.
Yeah, it was.
It was a statement of, this is a bad movie.
Yeah.
This is not a good film.
Right.
Doesn't deserve these nominations. And I am not happy with the decision that you made of splitting these two movies, which very clearly now was out of greed and money.
I 100% agree with you. I think it's very much a statement on the movie as much as it is a statement on the industry practice. I don't think voters, industry members want to see movies being cut up into pieces and being sold, consecutively or unnecessarily. And so I think this is already a red flag for whoever out there is predicting that Dune whatever is going to end up getting nominated for 10 Academy Awards and finally winning Best Picture. I think this is, possibly a wake-up call that that's not necessarily what the Academy enjoys and what they're voting for right now.
It'll still be number one on Gold Derby.
It will still be number one on Gold Derby. But yes, I think it was an absolutely brutal category to miss.
And I will say the other big thing that happened in this category was the surprise nomination for Sweet Dreams of Joy.
Yes.
Which I've heard from Twitter. I'm not well versed, so I apologize. But look it up after you're done listening to this, that it was a song that was completed like in 2017.
Wow.
2018.
Really?
Yeah. It just hadn't been included in a film yet.
Wow.
Or this film. It's a weird story. It's a weird story, and people were already fishing that there might have been something fishy about this nomination.
Oh no! Don't tell me that. Oh, come on. I mean, well, listen. I'll say this. We know a little bit of the movie, and we thought, this could appeal to the voters because it's a unique story. It's about musicians, right? And I think this category really tries to spotlight different types of music. I remember, for example, when they had that really sort of ingenious nomination for the original song from Tears of the Flower Moon. And so I thought, opera singers, they don't get a chance to do that very often. Aging opera singers is the subject of the film. So I thought the branch could respond to that. So I'm not totally shocked to see it there. I will say, I believe it's the first time since 2015 that we get two docs on this list. One doc being about Diane Warren. So, and the last time that happened was Diane Warren in 2015 for The Hunting Ground.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the 2015 year.
Man,
it was
Diane Warren is a beast.
Diane Warren and J. Ralph. Let's see if Diane Warren can finally win.
I don't know.
a competitive Oscar.
She's not beating K-pop. I will eat my boot if she beats K-pop.
What Diane Warren needs is the Best Picture movie.
Yes.
She needs Relentless to be nominated for Best Picture, and then she could win the Oscar.
I learned my lesson in past years of not predicting Diane Warren. I wasn't going to do that.
That's a good lesson.
Because you were flirting with it.
I was flirting with it. Like, can they really do that?
Yep.
And yeah, they can.
Yes, they can.
They absolutely can.
They will nominate. Diane Warren will be the first person to reach 100 nominations.
You know what? Diane Warren's Relentless was shortlisted, I believe, for original score.
Yeah.
That's how much they love Diane Warren. The rare documentary. We talk about when is a documentary going to break into one of those craft categories.
Yeah, it will be a Diane Warren documentary. For Best Makeup and Hairstyling, the nominees were Frankenstein, Kukuho, Sinners, The Smashing Machine, and The Ugly Stepsister, which was a really cool nomination.
Hands down, one of my favorite categories of this year's Oscars. Super massively eclectic.
Yeah.
You have 3 horror films included. They could not look any different. Any more different. It was great to see Frankenstein get nominated because Guillermo del Toro films do have a history of not making it on this list. Maybe there could have been an egregious snub. That was not the case.
It was a favorite. No way. I don't think so.
I mean, I remember when they snubbed Shape of Water, and so, you never know. I remember when they snubbed Black Panther, and so it's great to see Sinners and Frankenstein on here together because I'm sure those filmmakers remember when each of their films did not make this list. Smashing Machine gets the spot of the real person. At the same time, we called this the Battle of the Safdies and the Battle of the A24 movies. They obviously chose the work that was done on Dwayne Johnson, very deserving. But it was great to see 2 international films here. Yeah. And again, we talk about like inches forward, tiny inches forward. Yeah. Not too often that we get to see 2 international films here. But certainly not from Japan, for example. I don't think Japan has broken into this category before. So that was really wonderful to see. G-Kids which is responsible. I think listeners will know for a lot of the movies from Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki. It's great to see them break into a live action category. And then The Ugly Stepsister out of Sundance was just a wonderful, wonderful surprise.
Yeah.
We had debated.
Yeah.
We had debated,
Yeah,
right?
I resisted putting it. Yeah.
You resisted putting it. I sort of said, listen, if I'm going to be forced
Well, because I thought it was only going to be one
Right.
foreign film, and I still thought that this was a category that Wicked could break into.
that was it, this was again one of those categories where we said, listen, if you watch the movie, maybe you don't, but there's a Bake Off, and if you watch the Bake Off, the work on the Tin Man is going to get it in.
Mm-hmm.
That did not happen. So we had the debate as to what international film we were going to put in, and we just said that Kokuho, with sort of its unique subject matter, fusing,
The world it's tackling,
fusing kabuki and yakuza, that those things are gonna help it break through, along with all the massive amount of money it made in Japan. It was also shortlisted for foreign film, and we felt a little bit disappointed that maybe The Ugly Stepsister was gonna get outgunned, even if it had a really good team that's been exposed to this branch before, because they've worked on films from Scandinavia, including 100-Year-Old Man. And Border, for example, and that was not the case. There was room for both of them, which is great to see.
Yeah, The Ugly Stepsister is a really cool film. If you haven't seen it,
and they love sort of those fantasy films. And I sort of said, like, listen, this branch that loves fantasy, they're gonna really respond to a film like The Ugly Stepsister, because also it's not just fantasy like in the realm of Cinderella and Pinocchio.
Twisted fantasy.
It's twisted fantasy, and it's also very much about self-image, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And makeup is kind of a character in the film
100%,
itself.
100%. Really cool nomination. Moving on to costume design, the nominees were Avatar, Fire, and Ash. What the hell?
Whoever got this, yeah.
Taking the spot, who would have thought Avatar, Fire, and Ash instead of Wicked?
Right.
That was shocking. So Avatar, Fire, and Ash, Frankenstein, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, and Sinners. This was a bit of a surprising category. I mean, obviously from Avatar. But besides Avatar, you and I were thinking that Marty was not going to make it because it was blanked out of the Costume Designers Guild. The number of people who've been nominated and not been first mentioned at the Costume Designers Guild at some point, or for the movie that they're contending for, is almost nobody.
I think it's a strong statement in the sense that the costumes were very good in Marty Supreme.
Good.
And we were very, very committed to the idea that Jack Fisk was going to get it for his production design. Could it maybe lead to Miyako getting in for costumes? Possibly, but we couldn't find a compelling argument for the Academy, the voters in this branch, welcoming a costume designer that they weren't at least somewhat familiar with from their guild. And Miyako did miss that nomination for Marty Supreme. Usually when that happens, it'll be because it's an international title. For example, something like The Grandmaster
right.
or something like I Am Love. But this is very much an American production. So this mention for Miyako is really massive. And I think it goes to show us and other listeners that it's more important to be in a top 5 DGA movie than it is to necessarily be known or exposed to the members in your branch.
Right. Unfortunately, films like Kiss of the Spider-Woman and The Testament of Van Lee, as worthy as that work was, Hedda, which got the Costume Designers Guild nomination, were left out. And in Kiss of the Spider-Woman's case, Colleen Atwood had another film, one battle after another. So
most people at the end pegged one battle after another for the nomination.
It didn't make the top 5, but I was certainly someone who was saying, if they can't choose, and they don't want to go to a film that maybe they didn't see because it wasn't promoted enough, like the Spider-Woman, they could just offer one battle after another.
And we had the debate as to if they really insist on giving one battle after another 14 nominations, this may be the category where they decide to give it that nom, and not, for example, something like makeup where the work on Sean Penn is just too small.
It was in the top 5 though for Gold Derby.
It was in the top 5 for and I believe it was close for costumes.
No, actually it wasn't.
No,
it was like number 8, number 9.
Interesting. See, I thought there was a lot of reputable pundits who were pegging one battle in this category. Now let's talk about Deborah L. Scott for a second. Listen, they really campaigned for this. I have to say, I remember
this is for Avatar.
Exactly. Her nomination for Avatar, Fire and Ash, the film's only nomination besides visual effects.
Crazy.
one of two nominations this year. They really campaigned hard for it. I remember like before the movie came out, like maybe a week, I remember seeing a video on all the work they did for the costumes. So they campaigned really hard for this. It paid off.
Never disregard things like that.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in this Oscar predicting game and you see like, oh, that's a weird video, or oh, that's a weird feature, right? Oh, that's a weird billboard. Right. Don't take it for granted.
Yes.
Because there's things happening behind that.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's really, really fascinating. I'm not sure who the hell predicted it. I will say she is a veteran.
Makes sense.
She is a veteran, which one reason why we
because
like
we
Colleen
we liked Colleen for that, right?
We wanted more veterans on this list. She did the costumes on Titanic. She won for that. And she's actually a 3-time Guild nominee for all her work on Avatar, and actually not for Titanic, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But so, when you look at it that way, maybe it's less surprising. This is this is her second nomination. It's not her first Oscar nomination. But I mean, I tip my hat to whoever ran that campaign. Because
nobody got that right, and that was an amazing nomination.
It's something that they've been fighting for more than a decade now, which is the idea that Avatar is more than just
visual effects,
actors, and motion capture. Like it has real makeup artists and hair designers and costume designers and production designers, and it feels like a battle they've been losing for a long time. Because you go again from the 2009 films to the 2022 film, and this year it's just visual effects. But I really do feel like the nomination for costume design for Avatar should kind of feel like a Best Picture nomination
100%.
to them, because it kind of feels like maybe again we're inching towards people accepting this idea that we can consider Avatar for more things than just visual effects.
And I also want to say, not to rag on Wicked too much, but in a way, Wicked and Avatar did similarly in terms of marginal critics. I would say that Avatar beat Wicked
Slightly, yeah.
Slightly, but I think that slight counts.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Academy was very firm in saying Avatar is a legacy project that we're going to embrace, even here and there, even if it's not in the heyday of its 9 or 8 nominations. Wicked is not that.
Right. I think maybe it could also be that the little bit of distance between Avatar, as small as it was, talking about 3 years, is a lot more effective.
Maybe you're right.
It's a lot more effective than 11 months.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
So that may also be a factor. I agree with you though. Just the legacy project of it, and
James Cameron, Cameron of it all,
the standing of James Cameron and John Landau in the industry.
Right. And so let's move on now to cinematography. And honestly, there were no surprises here. These were the 5. Oh, actually. Yeah, there was one surprise that was flirting outside the top 5, right?
Right.
And that is Marty Supreme.
Yeah.
But you and I were convinced that it was going to get in.
We caught steam late after that ASC nomination.
We got very good odds off of it.
Right.
People being late to it.
Right.
And so this is only Darius Kanji's 3rd nomination.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
But I think a lot of people were sort of saying that Darius Kanji, in the predictions at least, the logic was that Darius Kanji can sort of be sidelined by the voting members this year because he was nominated as the sole nominee for Bardo, and that instead they were going to nominate Lucas Zhao for Hamnet because he didn't get in with his last Best Picture movie, which was Zone of Interest. But no, I think we've continued to see Lucas Zhao struggle in films shot in color.
But we also said that it's going to be weird to give Lucas Zhao his 3rd nomination. And Darius Kanji has yet to get his 3rd.
Right.
We thought that was a weird.
We kind of said that we wanted someone. We have some veterans on here, but we wanted a veteran who's been working for a sizable, for a significant amount of time, who's had a sizable career.
The upper echelon.
Exactly. So Darius Kanji is like they're rubbing shoulders with Ed Lockman and Robert Richardson and Roger Deakins. These are all filmmakers that are sort of working in the same period, and so it made sense to us to include him there.
Right. So I'm sorry, I didn't mention the list. The nominees were Frankenstein, Marty Supreme, One Bad After Another, Sinners, and Train Dreams. Again, Marty Supreme getting in there over the favorite being Hamnet.
Yeah. Again, even if Hamnet was really losing steam.
I think if you were paying attention to the breadcrumbs, you were seeing that was a snub waiting to happen.
Yeah, and a lot of significant pundits were saying Hamnet was not going to make it. This was, I think, a really disappointing snub for Focus Features, who otherwise had a pretty good day. I'm sure they're disappointed. Yeah, I'm sure disappointed about that. But I will say it's not the worst snub that Handmaid had all day.
Yes,
So
we'll get to that. For best production design, there was one very surprising nominee here.
What the hell?
Very, very surprising. But had we seen the BAFTA, I think we would have clocked it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that is that for production design, the nominees were Frankenstein, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, Sinners, and One Battle After Another.
Right.
And that becomes One Battle's 13th nomination.
Right. And it would have, in theory, for the way we were thinking about it, how it was going to break down mathematically, it would have been its 14th nomination, right? Except there is going to be a significant snub for that film, which we'll get into later. But yes, it was a surprising mention for One Battle After Another. I think it's certainly the favorite to win the contemporary category at the Guild, but not very often that you see contemporary films land here, especially not contemporary films without their costume designer. And it's kind of interesting because there were some pundits who were, saying that the category of costume design was so thin that Colleen would get in for One Battle After Another, which led us to believe that maybe Colleen could surprise for something flashier like Kiss of the Spider Woman. Lo and behold, Colleen does not get in for One Battle After Another, but her film's production design does get in.
Yeah.
But I think, it's kind of fun. I
like the nomination.
I do like the nomination, and I think the work merits a spotlight. I think it's also kind of fun in the sense that Florencia Martin, I believe, worked with Paul Thomas Anderson on Licorice Pizza, and she was a nominee already for Babylon. So a little bit surprising, right, to see her here included.
In the BAFTA, they nominated. Wasn't it the same 5?
It was. It went 5 with the BAFTA, but we did not have the BAFTA with us.
I think that would have helped.
Yeah.
For best editing, let's say that the Ace Eddie, we have to mention, came out rather recently. And
too late for the predictions, but it came out same day as the WGA nominees. And so I think the Ace Eddie might have confused the situation more.
Yeah.
I would have rather had the BAFTA. I mean, you're going to say that it would have revealed something, but again, I'm going to point out the idea that I've been on this train for a while.
Well, I'll just say that for the Oscars, the nominees for Best Film Editing were F1, Marty Supreme, One Battle After Another, Sentimental Value, and Sinners. And as you were saying, Joseph, you were high on the idea that Sentimental Value was going to get nominated here, mainly because we've seen a trend of a Best Picture foreign language film making this list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I was of the opinion that the editing in all of Joachim Trier's films are very, specific, meticulous. That's certainly a part of how he kind of structures the experience.
Mm-hmm.
But when I saw the film, I thought there were too many fade to blacks or too many cut to blacks. And, possibly even in my own personal opinion, not as tight as I've seen some of his other films. And so I was led astray by that opinion. And I thought, I really don't think Sentimental Value is going to crack this list. I would see another foreign film make this list before Sentimental Value, like Sarat.
Right.
Even something like The Secret Agent, which I think is beautifully edited.
Mm-hmm.
And the pattern continues, and they nominated a foreign language film, arguably the biggest foreign language film that's included in the nominations.
100%.
And I will say it got nominated at the BAFTA.
It got nominated at the BAFTA, and it got nominated at the ACE.
Yes.
Right? And so had you had those two things,
100%.
more people would have caught on. I had the benefit of really enjoying the editing work. It stood out to me. At the same time, in the back of my mind, I understood that it was likely that a foreign film was going to land here. I just think it goes to show you that there's a strong percentage of voters in this branch that possibly work on international titles or have a strong affinity for international titles. I think that's what we're seeing, and it's really, I think, solidified itself over the last few years. Because I would argue Sentimental Value is possibly maybe the quote less flashy edited film, compared to some recent nominees here. But I think I'm not surprised by the mention also in the sense that I think editors know that Olivier is a longtime collaborator of Joaquin, and I feel like that's something we've seen recently, which is editors wanting to nominate these editors that have been longtime collaborators with the filmmakers. I mean, the same thing with Michael Shaver with Ryan Coogler's Sinners. They've worked together for so many films. I think to me the more surprising one, and again, I think people are gonna harp. People really believed that there was going to be a veteran in the category and that it was going to be the editor for F1. I resisted that theory for a long time.
I told you that you were crazy for resisting.
And my argument was there's no way, because Steven Mirion does not get in without his movie getting into Best Picture. But lo and behold, it does get into Best Picture. And so that is, again, that's the way the cookie crumbles. But yeah.
I think you told me that when we were predicting at some point, you were like, Jules, if F1 gets nominated for film editing, it's getting nominated for Best Picture.
Yes.
And you said it with like this stern, forewarning face. Like, listen, this is going to happen if editing happens.
Yeah. So you better pray that it does. But if you look at the BAFTA, for example, you don't see Sentimental Value nominated. But you did.
It wasn't nominated for the BAFTA.
It was actually not nominated for the BAFTA.
Apologies.
But what you did see was a double veteran, and so it goes to show you the idea that a veteran is quote unquote important. And I'm sure next year editors are gonna say, I don't care and not nominate a veteran. But this year at least it was important, because the only nominees, I guess the surprising nominees for the BAFTA were F1, possibly because it didn't do great. But House of Dynamite, it was its only nomination, and it was one of the few categories that it maybe had a shot in at the Oscars because of the need for a veteran. Other nominees were Marty Supreme, One Bad After Another, and Sinners. At the Ace Eddie, right, is where you do see Sentimental Value get nominated for feature film drama, along with Hamnet, Sinners, F1, Weapons, which at one point we were considering. Great to see Weapons there. And then on the feature comedy, Bugonia, which we debated for the veteran spot as well. Marty Supreme, One Bad After Another, Wake Up Dead Man, Wicked for Good, which could have been another veteran. Kind of something interesting that we caught on to early, which did sort of manifest itself here, was no double directors. So Josh Safdie.
Yes, we talked about, listen, the odds that the film editing branch was going to let in two directors,
right,
for two different films. That was very unlikely.
Yeah, we didn't think there was a great chance, and we sort of figured that it was going to factor against Chloé Zhao because she was recently nominated for Nomadland.
Also because I think, Marty Supreme and the Safdie's films in general, include so much editing into their aesthetic.
Right.
Chloé Zhao is more organic in the way she kind of formulates her films.
Yeah.
So that was just a showier pick.
Yeah, a flashier pick. I will say Josh got nominated along with Ronald Braunstein, who is a writer on the film as well.
Oh, he's also a producer, so
yeah,
he got nominated 3 times.
Yeah.
And Josh, I believe, gets nominated 4 times?
Josh, I believe, gets nominated 4 times.
Wow. All right. Well, that was film editing. Let's move on really quick to the screenplay categories before we move on into the new category and the acting, directing picture.
Yes.
So I want to say the easy one. Everyone got adapted screenplay correct.
Yes.
Which are Begonia, Frankenstein, Hamnet, One Bad After Another, and Train Dreams. Those were by far the favorites.
Yes, there wasn't too much debate as to whether that could surprise or whether we were overlooking any major contender. I will say,
I believe the scripter happened recently too, and that PTA won that for One Bad After Another.
I will say that over at the BAFTA, it has maybe a little bit more of an entertaining list. Nominees there were One Bad After Another, Bugonia, and Hamnet, but they sided for The Ballad of Wallace Island and Pillion. Frankenstein in general had a pretty terrible day at BAFTA.
Yeah, pretty bad.
And Train Dreams did not do much better, although I suppose there was less expectation there. Some interesting things here. I think we kind of caught on to the Frankenstein thing pretty early because of the Telluride love.
Yes.
Chloé Zhao nominated here.
The films that make the Telluride lineup.
I'm sorry, excuse me. The Toronto
People's Choice
Award. The People's Choice Award semifinalists and
should have a very good chance of breaking into screenplay. And actually, this was one of the first years in a while where not all 3 made it.
Right.
Because the The third place went to Wake Up Dead Man, which
And so the debate was, is there room for 3 Netflix movies? And obviously there was not.
But also we had debated that there should be diminishing returns.
Yes.
So
We kind of argued, well, can there really be diminishing returns for the Knives Out movies? Because they never really got in more than just that one, loyalty from that one branch.
Diminishing returns is diminishing returns, 1-0.
I mean, I will say it was a pretty, again, it hasn't been a great season for Wake Up Dead Man, especially after Toronto and the way people were pegging it, which, again, maybe shouldn't be surprising. But yes, so this was the more expected of the screenplay category. The more interesting one is original screenplay.
I will say I'm so happy that I clocked the nomination for Robert Kaplow for Blue Moon.
I give you a lot of credit for that because I was not thinking that at all.
Right. So the nominees for original screenplay were Blue Moon, It Was Just an Accident, Marty Supreme, Sentimental Value, and Sinners. So this is the second and last nomination that Jafar Panahi receives for It Was Just an Accident. It does not get nominated anywhere else.
Again, inches for international films, just inches.
Marty Supreme was a favorite. Sentimental Value was a favorite. Sinners was a favorite. Blue Moon was not a favorite. And so I was very, very, very happy that I clocked that one. Very few people were predicting it. People were going with The Secret Agent. People were going with Sorry Baby. There was very few to no people going Blue Moon.
I absolutely agree with you. I think at the end, most people sided with Sorry Baby and A24 getting a second nomination here. You convinced me on Blue Moon at the 11th hour.
And I was right.
And you were right. And again, I still don't know how you did it, but it makes a lot of sense. Sony Picture Classic shows up here. We at one point had the discussion as to if it gets screenplay and actor, is it a Best Picture movie? And so after this nomination was announced, we started thinking,
shit.
Yeah, maybe it had just enough to break into Best Picture. We also had a little bit of a debate in terms of how the foreign films would stack up here. So like everyone knows Sinners, Marty Supreme, and Sentimental Value, especially after the European Film Awards, were favorites here. That fourth spot, a lot of people were comfortable with It Was Just an Accident. And the fifth spot, a lot of people were sort of siding with The Secret Agent because The Secret Agent has gotten a lot of love, especially in the foreign film category. And if anything, usually what you'll see is the favorite for foreign film breaking in to the screenplay and directing fields. But that was not the case this year. And let's start with, so it starts with original screenplay with The Secret Agent. After winning the Golden Globe for international film, does not make it into the screenplay category. And so I think you had convinced us to sort of consider whether or not there was room for both. It Was Just an Accident and The Secret Agent, if there was room for 3 neon titles on this list when Sentimental Value was already in there. And ultimately, I think you sided with It Was Just an Accident, right?
Right.
And I was skeptical about it, so I don't know what exactly led you to believe that Jafar Panahi had the edge here.
Well, I mean, I think part of me thinking that he had the edge is because I really firmly believed I didn't buy into he wasn't going to get on for Best Picture. You know, I thought that it was a Best Picture, foreign film, screenplay nominee, director nominee at minimum. You know, so I never really bought into it.
So you it's almost like you bought more into the idea that if you had to snub one of them, it would be The Secret Agent.
Right, 100%.
Right.
And also I think that, and we discussed this, you know, for me, the Secret Agent, as much as a film that I love, for me, it's a film that I would qualify as, you know, the directorial vision and execution sticks out more to me than the writing, you know, if I were to, you know, judge them side by side.
Right.
And I thought that writers might feel the same way.
Right. And maybe to give some context to this, the BAFTA nominees were Marty Supreme, Sinners, Sentimental Value. Then you had The Secret Agent get in, right?
Right.
And you had the British independent film I Swear, which has been a hit there and did well at BAFTA overall. And so it just goes to show you that best case scenario, there were maybe 4 spots that were taken up, and there was one really open spot.
Right.
Then again, The Secret Agent, and It Was Just an Accident. Obviously, a little bit neck and neck there with Jafar Panahi edging out Kleber, but he does it without the BAFTA nomination. And then over at the WGA, because they announced around the same time, the Writers Guild Award, a couple of other films popped out that we thought could show up. Nominees included Marty Supreme and Sinners. Remember, a lot of international titles were disqualified. I actually even believe Blue Moon did not qualify. Sometimes this depends on whether you're can be included because of guild eligibility. So nominees ended up being Weapons, right? Which we thought could possibly surprise here.
Possibly.
Right? Black Bag, which we had debated if enough people, if the WGA list had come out a little bit earlier, could Black Bag have taken that spot? I believe so. I definitely think.
Maybe.
I mean, David Coop is a legend in the industry, has never been nominated. Would have been another Focus Features movie, which would have been great. Big news for them. And then the second A24 movie was not Sorry Baby, and I believe it was eligible. But the second A24 movie was If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, which was surprising.
Yeah, it was surprising. But I also want to say that that just goes to show you that even a film like If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, which got nominated for 1 Academy Award, there was still passion behind it because it could find its way into these other corners in the American industry guilds. That it wasn't really a film that it was writing by itself.
Right.
It was writing alone, but there was passion behind it.
Right.
And that it would then a nomination for Rose Byrne makes sense.
Right.
Because it's different being in a film where you are the only nomination that lands, but there's passion behind you. Amy Madigan for Weapons too.
Right.
As opposed to a film that doesn't do well at the guilds and you stand to be the only nominee and there isn't a lot of passion behind you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because the film doesn't really pop up anywhere else.
Right.
And that's happened in the past. So I think that goes to show you that a lot of us were underestimating, even you and I, who had Rose Byrne at 100 to 1 odds. A lot of us were underestimating just how formidable a contender Rose Byrne was.
Right.
For If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You.
Yeah, and it's great to see the film here. We're gonna have a Bronstein versus Bronstein battle, which is gonna be fun.
At the WGA.
At the WGA, which is gonna be fun. I do think if we had gotten this list beforehand, and same thing goes with other prognosticators, you maybe would have seen a little bit of holes in the opportunity for Sorry Baby. Yeah. Right? I think that snub is sort of significant.
I think a lot of people were riding on the Julia Roberts spotlighting at the Golden Globes, which I never really bought that. I didn't buy a lot into that.
I bought it. I think that's not insignificant. I think, again...
apparently it wasn't that significant.
Apparently, yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't. I think she needed to come on board as an executive producer earlier. So she was a little bit late. But I think it was further away from this nomination. And I think the BAFTA mention for The Secret Agent, again, would have had me siding for Kleber getting in and not Jafar. There was a lot of talk about how far the Jafar Panahi film had fallen recently. Yeah. And a lot of, debate as to whether it can claw its way back into Best Picture. We resisted that, knowing sort of his standing in the industry and, just how Iran is in the news or has been in the news lately. Did not get a nomination for Best Picture, which is extremely disappointing. They nominated F1 instead, which is, again, choices. But so it was great to at least see it nominated for one category other than international film.
100%.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that was one of the more unfortunate things about the nominations. And I agree with you. I resisted it for a very long time, and it came true. For Best Casting, which was the new category before we get into the acting categories, the nominees were Hamnet, Marty Supreme, One Bite After Another, The Secret Agent, and Sinners. I will say, minus The Secret Agent, these were the favorites.
Yeah.
And swap out Sentimental Value for The Secret Agent. So a foreign language film still made it in. We were predicting 2.
Right.
Sentimental Value and Sarat. Unfortunately for us, neither got in.
Right.
And instead The Secret Agent did. But I will say there was still some pushback here because only 1 got in.
Right.
And you would think that Sentimental Value was the favorite because it got that European Film Award mention. And so I just felt that, the foreign voters were more attuned to Sentimental Value being a casting choice.
Right.
But ended up being The Secret Agent. And I think this is one of my favorite nominations.
Really?
Even though I got it wrong, so it's bittersweet.
Right.
But I love the nomination for Secret Agent. I think the casting choices here in this film were amazing and added so much color to the film.
Yeah,
I'm
a lot of
sad to
richness.
not see Surratt here.
That's what I was gonna say. Was to me, this is one of the most heartbreaking snubs because it really did feel like Surratt was gonna have an opportunity here.
Yeah.
It was longlisted on this for the Oscars on that great day that it had a while ago, but it was also longlisted at the BAFTA. So it really felt like there was something that these casting directors, members of the branch were looking at that was really resonating with them. And if you see the film, and we encourage all listeners to see the film in the biggest screen possible, you sort of understand why this film is showing up in so many places, but certainly in casting. And we thought, is there maybe something undeniable about the film that was going to able to get it across the finish line? Again, there's really only room for one international film. So this is just inches again. Yeah. And so it ends up being the neon film, The Secret Agent. I wished it was just an accident, was even on the long list. It wasn't. I do want to mention that at the BAFTA, for example, they nominated Marty Supreme, One Battle After Another, Sinners. They went with Sentimental Value.
That would have definitely convinced me.
And that exactly, and we would have been wrong, right? So it's interesting also to note the divergences between these voting groups. And lastly, I Swear,
right,
which again was unique to the BAFTA because it hadn't been released here. But so I think at the end, it's great to see a Secret Agent there. I completely agree with you. I wish there would have been, again, more international films. We predicted Sentimental Value.
And Surratt, yeah.
And Surratt. And so we voted for 2 international films, which for the most part today backfired in almost every category. We picked the wrong one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Other than that, the favorites did get in. Marty, Hamnet, One Battle, and Sinners.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's move on to the acting categories. Let's start with supporting actress. The nominees were Elle Fanning, Sentimental Value; Inga Ipsdotter Lilias, Sentimental Value; Amy Madigan, Weapons; Wunmi Mosaku, Sinners; and Teyana Taylor for One Battle After Another. And so I will say that I was ecstatic that Elle Fanning got nominated finally.
I know.
You and I were one of the few people predicting her. A lot of people had jumped ship with the BAFTA snub and the no SAGs, and because she didn't win enough critics groups, stuff like that. But you and I held firm, and we said, listen, if Elle Fanning is in another Best Picture, because she's coming off one. She's coming off
right.
Bob Dylan's film.
Right, A Complete Unknown.
She's in another Best Picture film. And her biggest competition now isn't Joan Baez, an actress playing Joan Baez. It's another actor who has fewer credits than Elle Fanning does. Elle Fanning has been around for a very long time. She's been acting since she was a baby.
Right.
We've seen her on our screens blossom into this beautifully talented woman.
Right.
Actress.
Right.
Actor. And you're going to tell me that they're going to snub her and instead include the likes of Inga Ipsdotter Lilias, who's amazing in her film. I love her in her film.
Yeah.
But she's not well known.
Right.
And then Odessa Azian, who is getting a lot of steam at the end.
Really?
For Marty Supreme. Okay, great. But she's younger than she's younger. She's younger than Elle Fanning, and she's gonna get the nomination first.
Right.
And they might have just that was her breakthrough.
Yeah. That was the discovery moment.
That was the discovery moment. So you're gonna tell me that they're gonna snub Elle Fanning, and not include her or include those 2 other actresses before they include her? To me, that made no sense.
And there was some,
and to me, honestly, and maybe I'm being overly sensitive here. I mean, I am a big Elle Fanning fan, but to me, it would have read as cruel.
Yeah.
It would have read as right? It would have read, okay,
that.
Listen, you were in a Best Picture movie last year. We said no. Instead, we're going to nominate this other actor who we don't know that much about, who's a discovery moment as well.
Yeah.
But we've decided that her moment is coming before yours. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, fine. Well, she's playing Joan Baez. Okay. All right, fine. And then you're going to do it again?
Yeah.
And again, this film is a favorite. It won the Grand Prix at Cannes. You're going to tell me they're going to do that again?
Right.
To me, it would have read as like, how do you not take that?
Right.
As I guess they just don't like me.
Right.
And I feel like, no one can dislike Elle Fanning because she's just that great. But B, I don't feel that they dislike her at all.
Right.
She's acted with several of her peers, with several in the industry from all walks of life, from all generations. I think that actors were primed to finally give her this moment and embrace her into the club. This will be one of many nominations that she will get in her career. I'm so ecstatic that she got it. So many people disbelieved. We believed 100% all the freaking way.
I mean, it's kind of interesting to know that like last year we got the first Culkin nominated and he won,
Right.
and so this year we get the first Fanning, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
You know, I will say this is one of the more remarkable categories of the year, because you have Elle Fanning and Inga staging a comeback after doing so poorly, the film doing
Yeah.
so poorly at SAG. Very few times are you gonna get two actors from the same film land in an acting category where not even one of them was spotlighted at SAG.
Yeah.
Most of the time, to get two actors in, you need both of them in for SAG, and it's not exclusive. I remember when Jesse Plemons was able to get in there for The Power of the Dog,
Right.
along with Cody, and he didn't have a SAG nomination. But most of the time, the predecessor to two Oscar nominees for a supporting category or a lead category for that matter,
From the same film.
for the same film, is usually the two individuals showing up at the SAG in much the same way that Benicio del Toro did and Sean Penn did. So for Elle Fanning and Inga to survive snubs, each of them, and make it into the final five is really impressive. So I will say that that's one thing. The other thing is you have Amy Madigan there, and she is the sole nomination for Weapons, but she's able to get in.
Yeah.
Right. And lo and behold, as we had theorized all year long, there had been a lot of discussion on Ariana Grande.
Right.
Some people talked about Gwyneth Paltrow. Some people talked about Emily Blunt. The veteran of the category, and again, there is only one, is Amy Madigan.
Right. She was the best to choose from of the veterans.
Right.
Point, period.
Right.
Period.
Right.
And I will say that, to your point of Elle Fanning and Inga Epstein-Lilius being able to make it in despite zero mentions at SAG, and Amy Madigan to be able to get in, as the sole nomination for a film, which we're seeing is becoming, less and less popular. I think goes to show you that the field for Best Supporting Actress, while it had some great contenders, I mean, this is a good list.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of, for lack of a better term, fluff. Not the strongest contenders.
Right.
Regardless of, your personal opinions about how you feel about certain performances, certain films, it was by and large, it was a group of performances here, films here that were just not as strong as what ultimately made the list. And there were a lot of, performances that would have been nice to have been spotlighted that were very far off, in the distance.
Right.
But in general, I think they said, listen, if I have to choose between some of these contenders and Elle Fanning, I'm definitely going to choose Elle Fanning. These contenders and Inga, I'm definitely going to choose Inga. And these contenders and Amy Madigan, I'm definitely choosing Amy Madigan.
I also want to take a moment here and mention, to piggyback off what you were saying, Amy Madigan is the only nominee in this category to not feature in a Best Picture movie, and the only one to feature as the film's only nomination. And so it goes to show you that very much the Academy is moving in the
four acting categories?
No, in the supporting actress category.
Yeah.
So the Academy is very much moving in the trajectory of supporting categories or just places to nominate Best Picture movies. We'll talk about this as we go into supporting actor, but if you get the double nomination for Sentimental Value in supporting actress and the double nomination for supporting actor for One Bad After Another, which again rarely happens, by the way, to have double nominations for two different films in two different categories in the same year. If you do that, I think we have a total of 5 movies from the nominees in the supporting category. So between supporting actor and supporting actress, the only movies that were nominated were One Bad After Another, Sentimental Value, Weapons, Frankenstein, Sinners. Yeah. So I think, again, it just goes to show you that this category is certainly moving in that direction.
But I will also say, I agree with you to a point, but I also think it had a lot to do with the contenders. I do think that in a year where, there might have been a bigger field in the supporting actress race and the supporting actor race. I mean, like I said, supporting actress was so fluid, and people were scratching their heads thinking, who's going to make up these 5? You and I were among the very early ones to say this is going to end up being a battle between Teyana Taylor and Amy Madigan. Before the precursors revealed the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. The supporting actor race was very, quickly narrowed down to like 7 contenders. There wasn't a big, group of contenders to choose from. And I also say that it was one of those years where the sheer dominance of One Bite After Another and Sinners made those two lists more concise.
Right. But I think there's something to be said about not just competition, but I also think there's something to be said about visibility, right? And so the more visible your film is because it's a contender in all these other categories, and specifically Best Picture, it seems that right now the easier time you're going to have getting into these supporting races. When we got nominated for Sinners,
we clocked that pretty early too.
And Teyana got nominated from One Bad After Another. And the other thing I was going to say that was kind of remarkable here is that we couldn't really find too many instances where Warner Brothers got 3 performances
from three
different movies into one single acting category.
Yeah.
And so Warner Brothers did really well in this category. I think it's a breakthrough to get all 3 of them nominated. We had hopes at the very last minute that Regina Hall could break in.
High hopes that our queen Regina Hall would get in. She's been in the industry for many decades. She has a small part in One Bite After Another, but it's still very potent. She's great in the film.
It's bigger than Isabella Rossellini's in Conclave.
Well, it's as much as Isabella Rossellini.
It's a little bit bigger from what I understood.
And we thought, well, if there's going to be a double nomination, why wouldn't it be in supporting actress for
Regina
One Bite After Another?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that never took off, and we didn't predict at the very end, and that broke our hearts.
But we thought she could surprise.
But we felt that the final nail in the coffin was, again, Regina missing that SAG nomination. Because if there stood to be a chance that 2 actresses from One Bite After Another were going to show up at the Oscars, it would have shown its teeth there at the SAG. And it did not.
I mean, I was really disappointed with it because I know, there's so many actors that have gotten support here in these supporting acting categories. I really thought Regina Hall could do it, and we were sort of thinking in parallel terms for someone like Delroy Lindo, which we'll speak on later, but did surprise, and so it was really disappointing. We had another major theme was, can One Bad After Another break 14 nominations or get to 14 nominations? We thought that Regina Hall would be sort of instrumental in that happening, but that's back when we didn't really figure it into races like production design. There was, again, we were really early on the idea of, can One Bad After Another get the most acting nominations ever. And unfortunately, I think
we saw that they resisted that.
I
think they said, I'm not sure that I want to nominate a film for 5 acting nominations.
Yes, and I would go further.
And because we're going to talk about the other bigger snub, being Chase Infinity. So I really felt that they felt strongly, at least this version of the Academy right now is not in the let's give a film 5 nominations.
Right.
We can give it 4, like we've seen, repeatedly, over the last several years. And you got 4 this year with Sentimental Value. But 5 is not something we're willing to do. And let's not even talk about 6.
Right.
But I feel like that was one of the sadder things, that we wanted to be proven wrong, and we wanted to see Regina Hall's name there.
Right.
Along, she's very deserving. She's wonderful in One Bite After Another. She deserves this recognition. The cynical part of me thinks that if it had been a different actor, maybe she does get in.
Maybe.
As cynical as that sounds, I can't help but think it.
And again, it's probably because a lot of voters don't know her for
her dramatic work,
or even her work in independent films.
Right.
That most of them either don't know her work overall or know her more for her populist films.
She deserved her flowers. But I will say there's one tiny silver lining, and I think we see it differently.
Right.
This tiny silver lining that I see is that while I'm disappointed severely that Regina Hall did not get nominated for One Bite After Another, I will say that in a way, the Chase Infinity snub for Best Actress made it a little bit less stinging. Because if I'm Regina Hall and I'm seeing that all my co-stars got nominated minus me,
right?
Number one, I can't help but think that you're gonna take that somewhat personal,
Right.
you know, or at least you can't help but get in your feelings about it because
Right.
it sucks.
Right.
You're basically telling everyone was worthy except me.
Yeah.
You know, you found room from everyone but me.
Right.
So in a way, it makes it a little less, you know, emphatic.
Right.
You know, you're the one that is not worthy.
Right.
Everyone else is.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I liked, well, I don't want to say liked, but the other thing that made it the blow a little less hard was that in nominating both Chase Infinity and Teyana Taylor for their first Academy Award nominations, and if you look at their filmographies, they're limited.
Right.
Because Teyana Taylor starts off as a singer, I believe, in the R&B field.
Mm-hmm.
Chase Infinity, this is her first film.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm Regina Hall and I'm seeing that Teyana Taylor, well, you know, with few credits, is getting this moment, and Chase Infinity on her first feature is getting this moment, and I've been working decades and I'm not getting diddly squat.
Right.
I'm also gonna take that harsh. You know, it's also gonna, you know, affect me a little bit, at least a little bit.
Right.
So, and only Teyana Taylor being able to do it because the part is just that good.
Right.
And she's just that great in it. You know, it to me, it softens the blow a little bit.
I don't know why, but I also want to make it sort of, I guess I want to paint the idea that maybe something that hurt Regina Hall and Chase Infinity is that the performances that got nominated have a little bit more, their time is a little bit more concentrated, if that makes sense. Like, I think
that's a good point.
That's something where Teyana really stands out.
Yeah.
Is in really,
She dominates the first.
She's essentially
first
the
third.
lead for the first 20, 25 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
Right? It's essentially her movie. So I do wonder if that's sort of a factor.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Even for those other performances, they do have this more concentrated element about them. It's kind of funny because in a sad, again, in a sort of really bittersweet, sad way, Chase Infinity and Regina Hall share a lot of moments together and share a lot of their best moments together. And so that's really kind of disappointing too.
Yeah. But I will say, and we'll talk about when we get to actors. I have a theory besides newness as to why Chase Infinity got snubbed.
Mm-hmm.
But for Regina Hall, it's hard to see that it wasn't just about you're not in it enough.
Right. Or I don't know you enough.
Or I don't know you enough. But again, if it were a different actor, maybe she gets in. And also, as we just saw last year, 8 minutes was enough for some people.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not enough this time.
I think all we have is the hope that Regina Hall will get nominated for another really worthy performance.
Again, it's one of the sadder things. And it's along those lines that we were talking about at the beginning of these inconsistencies that we, can't help but feel kind of heartbroken by. You know, it's unfortunate.
I will say that over at the BAFTA, Odessa As Young continued her late
That would have
momentum.
convinced me that she was going to get nominated.
She got nominated for Marty Supreme, as did Inga for Sentimental Value, Wound Me for Sinners, Teyana Taylor for One Battle. Emily Watson did end up getting in for Hammett,
that would happen.
as you had suspected. There were 6 spots here, and so they gave the final spot to Carey Mulligan for The Ballad of Wallace Island.
Yeah, which I think goes to show that I think there weren't a lot of people that they were passionate about.
But again, to me, it's about visibility because this is the same BAFTA that included Tessa Thompson on the long list for Hedda, but did not include Nina Haas, which again, if you watch the film, is a weird. Very strange decision.
Very weird.
But yeah.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about winners at a later date, but I want to say, and this will be the first time, this isn't the first time we've mentioned it, we'll mention it more. Do not sleep on Wumi Mosaku for Sinners. Yeah. Especially the day that Sinners had. With breaking the records, getting 3 acting nominations, it's possibly going to win the SAG award. You know, in the event that it goes empty-handed, expect some surprise wins. Empty-handed in the sense that it doesn't win Best Picture. So expect some surprise wins for Sinners. There's a lot of love for it, clearly. And Wumi Mosaku, if you have issues giving it to Amy Madigan for Weapons, if you're not crazy about Teyana Taylor's prickly character in One Bite After Another, guess what? You got Wunmi Mosaku right there for Sinners. And she's great in Sinners.
I really do think that there is a very good chance that Wunmi turns the title on this at the SAGs.
Yes. And if it happens, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Best Supporting Actor. There was one big snub here, but as we said, I couldn't help but feel really vindicated because we talked about it a lot in our last podcast. The nominees were Benicio del Toro for One Battle After Another, Jacob Elordi for Frankenstein, Delroy Lindo for Sinners, Sean Penn for One Battle After Another, and Stellan Skarsgård for Sentimental Value. And the big surprise here is that Delroy Lindo did make the list for Sinners. We told you all that a list that included both Paul Mescal for his second nomination after just being included for Aftersun a couple years ago, and another actor, same age range, getting his first moment, very known for being a heartthrob, getting his moment finally in Frankenstein, Jacob Elordi. There was something off about that. That is not the typical. That's not the typical supporting actor list we see. We're missing some veteran blood here besides Sean Penn, and Stan Scott. Well, we do have enough veterans, but it felt like a wrong list from the get go to have both Jacob Elordi and Paul Mescal.
It's just too much. It's just too much. And again, you can, and part of it that doesn't help is just the idea that everyone is really, I think, in the industry, really aware. Those two actors aren't going anywhere. In fact, their parts are just going to get bigger. Yeah. And so sidelining one of them at the very least is not going to be that detrimental. Yeah. And so there's also just too little time between nominations for Paul Mescal.
Way too little.
And I had discussed this ever since I saw it with you. Like, I'm not sure Paul Mescal is going to get in. And on top of that, like,
it took some convincing for me, but as the year waned, I really was, but I will say at the beginning, I thought he was going to be the only young presence in the in the list.
Right.
Until Jacob picked up a lot of steam.
Right. Yeah. But I think another thing that we saw play out here is the bias against Shakespeare. I really believe that's a thing. I really do.
Shakespeare does not have luck in this category.
Shakespeare's a performance, I don't think is going to be nominated until there's a performance that's going to win. For playing Shakespeare. And it's going to be...
I will say, if Paul Mescal had not been nominated for Aftersun...
Oh, yeah. No.
He
That's
would
a for
get
sure
nominated
thing.
And he might even get nominated over Jacob Elordi if it was a tight race between the two of them.
Absolutely.
But the fact that he had been nominated for Aftersun made this a list that made no sense.
Right.
I will say that if I had been free to do what I wanted to do, I would have put Delroy Lindo on the list because, let's get into it. There is, and we talked about in the last episode, how are you going to tell me that a veteran like Delroy Lindo, who's never been nominated, he's in his 70s, he's been working for decades,
right?
And you're not going to spotlight him. Okay, you just snubbed him bigly for, The Five Bloods.
Yeah.
Okay, you didn't like the movie, you didn't see it. Spike Lee had just been there. Okay, fine. But you're going to tell me you're going to snub Delroy Lindo, who's been in the entertainment industry for decades, and he's in an Oscar favorite like Sinners?
Yeah.
That made no sense. And then you're going to tell me it's going to be for Paul Mescal's second nomination or Jacob Elordi's first? That made no damn sense.
Yeah.
That made no freaking sense.
Yeah.
So I felt so sure that Delroy Lindo was going to happen, but we had to resist predicting him because I think we were at odds. I thought maybe it was going to be Jacob Elordi and not Paul Mescal. You thought it was going to be Paul Mescal. But also we had such good odds on Paul Mescal that we couldn't let go of him.
We couldn't let go of him.
Right. We had him 100-1.
But I think this is now Delroy's second film in Best Picture because he was in the Cider House Rules. Yeah. He is given the material in the movie. To me, the more disappointing thing is I believe they didn't nominate him for the SAG. But was
no way.
No, I mean for Sinners, remember they nominated Miles.
You mean individually? He's nominated as an ensemble.
Yeah, he did not nominate him individually, and they nominated Miles instead.
That's something else that added fuel to this idea that I was saying. That how are you going to tell me amidst all of this that I'm saying? On top of it, SAG voters found a spot for Miles Caden.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but I also believe that they did not nominate Delroy Lindo for lead actor for Five Bloods.
They didn't.
And so to me, it's sort of like he's after all that, he's still going to get hired for an individual SAG. Like this was his Jamie Lee Curtis, everything, everywhere, all at once kind of moment. Right. They screwed it up and they didn't nominate him at the SAG like he was supposed to be nominated.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. But I'm happy to see that that he was able to make that up and still pick up the Oscar.
But I also want to say, we talk about this every year, and we just talked about in supporting actors. The glaring inconsistencies of it all, is bothersome. Like, you could be big fans of a lot of people on this list, a lot of people who are included in the acting categories. Just to mention this list, Jacob Elordi is receiving his first nomination at 28.
Right.
Paul Mescal received his first nomination at 25?
Right.
This is Delroy Lindo's first nomination.
I know.
At 73
I know.
People.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that, how can you not get disappointment?
Right.
How does it look fair? How does it look fair at all?
Yeah.
And then you're going to say, or some people might say, well, it's about the work and the performances. It's not, unfortunately, about that. It's about being in the right movie in the right time,
Right.
and certain other machinery in the background gets to decide what is the right movie and what is the right time.
Yeah. 100%.
That's just the truth. And
Yeah.
so when you look at those glaring inconsistencies, it can't help but feel kind of heartbreaking. I'm so happy he got this moment,
Yeah, me too.
even if we didn't predict it correctly.
Yeah.
He deserves this moment. I feel opposite to you. I don't think he has that much material in the movie. I think that's one reason, a big reason that he doesn't get nominated at SAG, because Miles Caton has the better part. Miles Caton has the better material, and I don't think it's like slightly. I think in the ensemble, he, again, a lot of his part is kind of comedic relief. He kind of disappears in sections. He doesn't have this like dramatic, emphatic moment, not the way that Umi Mosaku has it, and maybe even you could argue Michael B. Jordan at the end of Sinners. He doesn't have that. So even when I saw the film the first time, I thought it's going to be tough. I only see him getting in if they're all going to get in, which is what happened.
I do feel like Miles has the better part. He has the Stephanie Shu part, where Delroy has the Jamie Lee Curtis part. But I do feel like they wrote for him specifically, in that scene where they're driving past the chain gang, and then he has that wonderful moment with Miles, and they talk about the mythology they share with music. And so I do feel like he had the material. And so after seeing it, I thought in my gut, yeah, it's going to be very difficult to say no to Delroy Lindo for this. If he had gotten that SAG nomination, I would have been like all for it. But it's the Miles Caton inclusion and the Delroy Lindo snub that really confused me, as to whether it could happen or not. But we did sort of sniff out the idea that he could really surprise. And you're right, I'm really happy he's on this list.
Right. So let's see. For Best Actress in a Leading Role, there was one very surprising omission here and one surprising inclusion. And that is, well, did you read who the nominees were for supporting actor at the BAFTA?
Oh, excuse me. Yes. Just so we have an idea, the BAFTA went Benicio del Toro, one battle after another. Sean Penn, one battle after another. Stellan Skarsgård, Sentimental Value. Jacob Elordi, Frankenstein. Paul Mescal for Hamnet, which is not surprising, British production. And then Peter Mullen for I Swear. And so they still did not nominate Delroy. But I do think that a big sort of resurgence for us to the idea that Delroy could break in was his inclusion on the long list. Right. So that already felt like that's something that Regina Hall could not muster. And so that was already significant. Or Elle Fanning even.
For Best Actress in a Leading Role, the nominees were Jessie Buckley, Hamnet, Rose Byrne, If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, Kate Hudson for Song Sung Blue, Renata Reinsve for Sentimental Value, and Emma Stone for Begonia. The big snub here being Chase Infinity. Instead, we get Kate Hudson. And, we've talked about this. We've talked about this for a while. This category we felt needed a real life figure. Some people could argue that Jessie Buckley technically is that, even though, she's called Agnes in the film and not Anne Hathaway. Maybe you could interpret that as a real life figure, possibly. We thought Amanda Seyfried had a great chance at being the real life figure for the Testament of Anne Lee. That went nowhere. And then I told you a while back, I said, listen, watch out for Kate Hudson, who's playing a real life figure in a film that, has a sort of accessibility to it. We know people in the industry who are responding to it. And she has, no secret, Goldie Hawn's daughter. Yeah. She's already a past nominee, and she's playing a part that obviously can be attention calling for certain actors, in that, the actor, the real life figure goes through a traumatic event, has to sort of overcome it. Unfortunately, it is the weakest of the group. And
by a wide margin, I would say.
Right. And, I will say that I think most people are surprised by how far Kate Hudson has made it, because not only that, she got nominated for the BAFTA as well. Right. So she did not, it just goes to show you, I hope everyone sees with these nominations when they come out, critics groups, they don't matter. It doesn't matter that you won 200 critics groups. If you got the SAG and you got the BAFTA, you got a mighty potent combination. Right. And that alone can be enough. Right. Globe, SAG, BAFTA, that alone can be enough. And so she's playing a real life figure. I told you to watch out for her. You didn't want to believe me. People were saying that this was like the Naiad nomination. where Annette Bening
do not drag
like
Annette Bening.
But you
into
mentioned it you mentioned it previously when we were talking one day. You said, we're missing a clunker here.
Yeah.
Like the chances of it being
At one point, you were saying this list could potentially be Hamnet, Sentimental Value, Bugonia, If I Had Legs I'd Kick You, and Testament of Van Lee,
which would have been an all-time
or
list.
Die My Love, or Hedda, and I would like that's too good. Like those movies are too
You're
good.
like, we're missing a clunker here.
Yeah, we need
Where's the clunker
iffy movie,
right? Well,
and they were really trying to make Julia Roberts happen for After the Hunt, but instead we get Kate Hudson. I think a couple of things that we learned here is it's important to have a real person. There weren't that many
don't discredit
real
life people,
and so I think that was her secret weapon. I mean, Focus Features gets in here 3 times.
I will say that Focus Features campaigned the shit out of Kate Hudson.
But what's shocking is that they campaigned the shit out of her, and they didn't lose any traction on Emma Stone. They kept Emma Stone. So
I think that goes to show the kind of weak field it was.
Yeah, potentially.
There were at the end there were about 6 contenders.
Or that maybe they were very smart in the sense that they knew they had the winner. They knew Emma Stone will get in on name alone and project alone. And so really we just have to help Kate Hudson out a little bit. And we have the card here, and the card is real life person.
100%. And sort of an accessible material maybe. Mm-hmm. But I will say, when you're seeing Kate Hudson show up award show after award show, even in the award show she's not nominated in, presenting Best Actor.
Right. Come on.
Listen, they are campaigning the shit out of her. And so we said it at the beginning of the podcast, it matters who you have in your corner. It matters who's in your corner, who's pushing the buttons, who's putting you out there, who's promoting you and running this campaign.
Right.
Kate Hudson is perfect proof of that.
And so Kate Hudson now matches the nominations of her mother. Right?
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
Goldie Hawn has a win and 2 nods, and Kate Hudson now has 2 nods. Hugh Jackman called this nomination early. He called this win early. Let's see if he somehow.
But I want to say,
right.
even that, and I said it to you. I said, watch out, because when you have Hugh Jackman on a stage saying you're going to win the Oscar, that doesn't, unfortunately, in the kind of industry we're dealing with, that doesn't go nowhere. That has reverberations,
right?
And that shows you kind of like the mechanization behind this whole thing.
Yeah,
we're basically, it was a statement saying we're pushing Kate Hudson to get in.
I will say that Kate Hudson is, I think, the nepo baby of the 20. she's the nepo baby. No,
another thing that we have to be real. That helps. And so I think you weren't looking hard enough at the positive. And I'll give. I'll be extra hard on you, and I'll say that you also didn't give enough to Annette Bening, and I had to convince you and say, listen, Joseph, Annette Bening is happening. Okay, if Jodie Foster is happening, there's no way in hell that Annette Bening is not getting in with her.
Right.
Especially after the snub for 20th Century Women.
Yeah.
So, like I said, you weren't paying enough attention. I was writing, at least my excuse is that I was writing on the idea that you just could not snub Chase Infinity because she was in a Best Picture movie despite the few credits.
Right.
And that Emma Stone and Bugonia, no matter the campaign for Kate Hudson, Bugonia was just obviously that liked because it kept doing better and better than people presumed. So there was just no space for Kate Hudson in my mind.
I think the other thing is that Craig Brewer now gets another performance in because he was able to get Terrence Howard in for Hustle and Flow.
And there's a symmetry to that because that was also the only nomination.
That's right. I think you're right. I think Chase Infinity, again, no matter how much of a lock we wanted to make her, she was always vulnerable for it being her first role, which to me, again, is a little bit.
I mean, it depends because sometimes it's not vulnerable for other people.
That's what I'm saying. That's what bothers me is when Chase Infinity can't make it into this category, but Ariana Grande can make it in for Wicked.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
That doesn't sit very well.
Doesn't make any sense. I will say supporting is easier to get into than lead.
Maybe.
We've talked about in previous episodes. There's unfortunately a bias. I think they hold the lead categories in higher esteem.
I mean, they nominated Kavanjane Wallace.
Right. Well, I mean, Kavanjane is great in her movie.
I'm not saying that she's not. I mean, Chase
is a very deserving nomination.
Chase is great in her movie too.
Right. But that's my point. My point is that I think Chase misses not only because she's new and she has few credits. The deal breaker for Chase was that, and I'm sorry, I agree with it. She is not lead.
I
If you see
mean,
the film, it's clear that she's not lead. And so while I don't doubt that there were voters that voted for her and voted for her in the lead category, I think there were voters who probably voted for her in the supporting category, and she lost votes.
oh, that's interesting.
You know, because it's just that evident that she's not lead. So when you're trying to sell me an actor who is in their debut, okay, for a lead category, and you and I agree there's a bias between lead and supporting, and then you want to sell me that it's a lead performance when what I'm seeing on the screen is not lead.
Right.
You know, I'd have a hard time picking a lead, and if I picked a lead, it's just Leo.
Right.
Then it's too much to ask in a way.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like she was destined to lose a lot of people based on that alone.
Yeah.
I would wager that had she stuck in supporting, we still might have seen two supporting actresses from one battle get in, and Chase would have been the second, and we still would have seen Regina left out because of time.
Interesting.
But Chase Infinity would have gotten in based on the category, based on the time. She would have gotten in with Teyana.
Interesting theory.
Right. So if you take Chase Infinity out of the equation, honestly, you're just left with Kate Hudson. You know, there's no one else to pick from.
Well, I think,
Not really. I mean, based on their content, I mean, I would have loved Jennifer Lawrence. She deserves to be on here. But again, they were never going to take that film seriously enough.
To me, it just comes down to visibility. Is Kate Hudson in Song Sung Blue better than Tessa Thompson and Hedda? No,
Absolutely
she's not.
Absolutely not.
Did one film get the red carpet treatment and get all these pieces in Hollywood Reporter
100%,
and Variety
100%.
and all these other outlets? Yes. And meanwhile, the other movie barely made it to a theater for about a week and then went straight to streaming.
100%.
So it almost makes more sense. Had you put Hedda straight into streaming, it probably would have walked out with 9 Emmy nominations.
Right.
Instead, it's going to walk out with 0
Right.
Oscar nominations, and it does not have a spot on Best Actress.
100%. I agree with you. And I think the other bittersweet thing about this list, you know, is that Kate Hudson is on her second nomination. And I know we've been focusing a lot on Kate Hudson, but
And again, I want to also repeat that she does a good job in the film. I feel like it's been a while since we've seen Kate Hudson on screen to begin with, much less on screen with a meaty part.
But I'll push back a little bit there, because I think one reason that we're so passionate about it is because she's not bad in the film, but it's not something that I would nominate. It's not something that I think is deserving of a nomination. I think you feel the same way. I think there are several other contenders that merited that position before Kate Hudson. And again, I think there's a lot of other factors at play for why she was able to manage that nomination. But what I was going to say is that it's bittersweet in a way, because Kate Hudson gives an iconic performance in Almost Famous,
Right.
her first nomination,
Right.
which I think the entire universe would have been happy if she won for that. You know,
Except the Academy, because they said no.
right. But I'm saying that first nomination is one of the best nominations,
Right.
because she's so fucking great in that movie. And it's the kind of performance where, honestly, no one else could have done that film, that moment better than Kate Hudson. It was kind of her call to, you know, fame in a way. But what a deserving nomination.
Right.
What a deserving recognition. And for me, it's a little bittersweet that her second one can't feel the same way.
Right.
You know, the same way that I think some people felt about Annette Bening, which is, you know, I love Annette Bening.
Right.
She's amazing. She's
amazing in everything.
Well, she's amazing. She's one of our greatest. But a lot of people felt like it's kind of bittersweet that we couldn't get this moment for 20th Century Woman, which, you know, she could have won for that, and people would have been happy.
Yeah.
You know, so I think there's something bittersweet about that I think is a repeating narrative in the Oscars, which is, you know, a lot of times when you land, you don't necessarily land for your best.
And I think also what I'll say is, like, one thing that frustrates me is just that idea of, like, the filmography doesn't sustain it. And so to me, it's like a little bit like Adrian Brody last year. Does his filmography sustain 2 Oscar wins? No, it does not. You know, like, circumstances worked out in his favor and circumstances worked out in Kate Hudson's favor. But if I were to ask you, what are your 5 favorite Kate Hudson performances? Why do I feel like you're going to have trouble coming up with that list?
No, I get that.
Same thing where if I were to ask you, well, what are your top 5 favorite Adrian Brody performances?
Right.
You know, and so
it's not saying that they're not talented actors.
Oh, no, not at all.
Right.
Not at all. It's just, it could be a mix of circumstance. It could be a mix of priorities.
Yeah.
It could be a mix of focus.
Right.
What I'm saying is, I can give you a list of my 5 favorite Delroy Lindo performances.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right.
And so here are these 2 actors on their second Delroy Lindo was in his 70s and he just got his first. And if they had somehow decided that Sinners is not a Best Picture movie, then Delroy Lindo would not have been nominated.
100%.
Yeah, exactly.
So very split reactions to Best Actress in a leading role. The nominees for Best Actor in a Leading Role are the opposite. They were the favorites to get in.
Right.
The nominees were Timothée Chalamet for Marty Supreme, Leo DiCaprio for One Bite After Another, Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon, Michael B. Jordan for Sinners, and Wagner Moura for The Secret Agent. Those were the 5 that were favorited to get in.
Another bona fide real person here with Lawrence Hart in Blue Moon,
100%.
Ethan Hawke's performance.
Marty Supreme is loosely based.
Yeah, we're calling that we're doing that like with the Hamnet movie.
Yeah. I will say that unfortunately, because this actor race was so tight, that last spot really felt like a race between Michael B. Jordan for Sinners and Joel Edgerton for Train Dreams.
Because Moura won
right,
the Golden Globe.
Right. 2 actors that, have been deserving of their flowers for some time. And it was just sad to see that one of them was destined to be left out.
Mm-hmm.
I think anyone who thought they would both get in was smoking crack.
Right.
There was just no just no way that they both were going to get in this list.
Right.
People had mentioned the idea of Jesse Plemons, and he did well at SAG. I will say that Jesse Plemons is my favorite performance by a male actor this year. He's amazing in Begonia, one of his best. If not
it's
his
a little
best.
bit more bittersweet too because of how the day ended up, right?
Right. And so he missed out, but I think he was very clearly number 7.
Right.
This was really a race between who could get that 5th, Joel or Michael. And if you had known that Sinners was destined to break 16, break into 16 nominations, how the hell did they not nominate Michael B. Jordan?
And they were pretty close because you and I had talked about that idea that Michael really breaks through with a movie like Fruitvale Station with Ryan, and then Joel is possibly breaking through with the nominated film Animal Kingdom that saw Jackie Weaver get nominated for supporting actress. That's in 2010. And so it's kind of sad that it came down to probably one of the 2 of them. Obviously, Sinners, the more favorite film, and Michael, as the lead in that film, I think carried so much of the responsibility. So it was kind of hard to see them saying no to him.
Right.
I will say that you and I started sniffing out some issues when Joel Edgerton missed the SAG nomination in favor of Jesse Plemons, even though Jesse Plemons didn't have like an individual nomination on the film side. So it made sense. They did not nominate for Power of the Dog. I think it would only have become more clear to us had we seen the BAFTA first, because the BAFTA list included Robert Aramayo for I Swear, Timothée Chalamet, Marty Supreme, Leo DiCaprio, One Bite After Another, Ethan Hawke, Blue Moon, Michael B. Jordan, Sinners, and lastly, Jesse Plemons for Begonia.
But keep in mind that Wagner Moura did not make the shortlist.
Yes, he didn't even make the shortlist, but thank God he got the Golden Globe nomination.
Yes.
Otherwise, it may have been, it would be Joel Edgerton instead of Wagner Moura. But it just goes to show you how close Jesse Plemons possibly came, because not only was he a Golden Globe, SAG, BAFTA nominee, but as we were alluding to a minute ago, Begonia is the Best Picture nominee. And his co-star is right there. Right, she got nominated, and so it's kind of, I think, a little bit bittersweet in the sense that it kind of crystallizes how close Jesse Plemons came to getting that nomination.
Yeah, and he absolutely deserves that. Again, he's my favorite. I know he's going to be here again. And it's always a little less defeating when they've already at least received some recognition. So that always helps. But I think, again, Emma Stone benefited from a weaker category.
Yeah, and the question is, what does Joel have to do to get in? And the answer is probably be...
Joel is the actor that I feel bad for. Because I feel like, how can you not take this omission, after, so many years of work? And your film is not for Best Picture.
Right.
And not feel like, I guess I'm just not good enough yet to make it, and that's not the truth, because, there's so much more at play here, like the race and Michael B. Jordan with a tough decision to make. But when you receive that kind of feedback, my film is not for Best Picture, I'm still not able to get in despite working my ass off. You can't help but feel, disappointed.
It's
I think.
tough. Yeah, it's not like Loving, where Ruth Negga was the only nomination for that film. And it's not like Loving in the sense that he played a real character in Loving, and that was sort of going for him as well. And so I think you're right. It is a little bittersweet.
Right.
But
I will say that I think Ethan Hawke said something really lovely when they asked him about how he felt about the nominations. And I'm going to butcher the quote, but I think he said something along the lines of, I've spent so many days, so many moments in my life in days like this where I did not receive the nomination, and I thought maybe there was a chance that I would. And how kind of how bittersweet and disappointing that is. And so today my thoughts are with all those people who kind of were hoping that their moment would land them an Oscar nomination and did not. And I thought that was just so, what a class act, what a beautiful sentiment, what a lovely man, what an incredible actor. It makes me that much more excited, as if I could be any more excited that Ethan Hawke is getting a moment, his first nomination in the lead acting category. He should have already been here for First Reformed. Right. He's the darkest of horses, we've said, to beat Timothée Chalamet at the SAG and to possibly be his biggest competition come Oscar time. But I just thought that was such a lovely sentiment.
Spoken like a genuine writer, I have to say. Really, really heartfelt and moving to hear that from Ethan Hawke. Great to see him here. First nomination in the lead category. And I have a suspicion that this category is going to get tighter and tighter as the weeks pass. Timothée Chalamet, youngest actor to 3, I believe now. Since Brando. Is that it? Since Brando?
Yeah, I believe that's the statistic.
And he gets all 3 leading acting nominations. I'm not sure Marlon Brando got all 3 of his.
I'm not sure.
First nominations in the lead category. I'd have to double check that. But so obviously the favorite, Timothée Chalamet. We'll see how the race evolves. But yeah, sad not to see Joel Edgerton there.
And for Best Director, we had Chloé Zhao for Hamnet, Josh Safdie for Marty Supreme, Paul Thomas Anderson for One Bite After Another, Joachim Trier for Sentimental Value, and Ryan Coogler for Sinners.
And this was a tough race. Some directors who got left off. Guillermo del Toro couldn't get back in for Frankenstein, despite being one of the more senior directors this season, right?
I have my doubts about that.
Yeah, hasn't been back since Shape of Water, has been in Best Picture twice since then, and Frankenstein seemed like it was going to be a bigger thing. Granted, had we seen the BAFTA list ahead of time, maybe we would have had a better idea that he was going to struggle because he did not make the BAFTA long list. Frankenstein in general did not have a great day at BAFTA, and so that might have been a tip-off. Great to see Chloé Zhao here. We had our doubts because usually this branch has been siding with welcoming new directors, and she's coming fresh off a couple of Oscar wins for Nomadland.
Right.
So we had our suspicions.
We felt very confident that she would miss.
Yes, but we did have that debate as to can they really snub Paul Mescal for Hamnet and Chloé Zhao for Hamnet?
Yeah, we said that it had to be one snub, not two.
So as soon as we saw Paul Mescal get snubbed, we're kind of like, okay, well, Chloé Zhao has to get out there, or people are going to riot.
You're right.
Great to see Ryan Coogler get his first nomination. Paul Thomas Anderson is there. Joachim Trier ended up being nominated, and it was tough because so many of the international film contenders, the Neon Four, they seemed like a good dark horse here, whether it was Kleber for The Secret Agent and what has, I guess, over the last few weeks become the favorite, I think, for foreign film from Brazil. Jafar Panahi for It Was Just an Accident, and even Olivier Lachey had some fans for Surratt, and Surratt did so well. European Film Award nominee, but it ended up being Joachim Trier, and you were pretty dead set on having to include him after the European Film Awards.
Yeah, 100%. I think most people were. I think prior to the European Film Awards, people thought it was going to be Jafar. Again, I was dead set that they were not going to snub Jafar Panahi for Best Director.
Me too. I mean, how do you look yourself in the mirror?
I will say I think that was one of the most devastating snubs for me, was Jafar Panahi not getting the director nom. I still am happy he was recognized either way for screenplay. Mm-hmm. But, to have a cinematic giant like Jafar Panahi get snubbed in, what should have been his moment, the Palme d'Or winner. I think this is the first time in several years, the trend that we've seen, that Palme d'Or does really well. Well, it did really bad here, or, poorly compared to some other non-Palme d'Or winners.
Right.
It's sad to see.
One thing that certainly we saw play out at these nominations is the idea that if you're an international film contender that's hoping to break out into major awards, most of the time you tend to have a little bit of a breakthrough before you absolutely, bust through the ceiling. Yeah. And so how many Panahi films have been nominated for an Oscar before this? Well, none. Kleber films that have been nominated before this? Well, none. But Joachim Trier is fresh out of
Worst Person
a
in the World.
huge breakout with Worst Person in the World, which scored an international film mention, his first, as well as a screenplay mention. And so it's only after that initial breakout that you can build some momentum into crashing into these bigger races.
I think that's an excellent point. I wish we had thought about that more.
Even if you look at something like Triangle of Sadness, for example, like Ruben was there for The Square in 2017. And so I think that maybe we shouldn't underestimate that factor going forward. Even if, maybe that, is more important than the quality of the movie and the quality of the context and the narrative, right? Because you can't get a better context or narrative than for either of those films, The Secret Agent, and It Was Just an Accident.
Right. And I think two other things that are worth mentioning is I think that we're still pushback in this category from directors who are very welcoming of foreign filmmakers. But I didn't think it seemed like they didn't want to list with too many foreign filmmakers.
I know.
So in a way, it's kind of bittersweet because we're so used to them making such, incredible decisions of welcoming these foreign auteurs into the fold. But this is a year where we could have seen 2 or 3 and they said one's enough.
It almost makes me, and this is unfortunate by the way, but it almost makes me reconsider those lists that had, if I remember correctly, Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest and Justine Trier for Anatomy of a Fall, which is one of the rare instances where you don't have a breakthrough, right, for Justine Trier. Or a list that included Paweł Pawlikowski for Cold War and Alfonso Cuarón for Roma. Jonathan Glazer and Alfonso Cuarón are not foreign entities to that branch.
Right.
They work on a global spectrum. Right. You know what I mean? And so I think maybe part of the issue was that Joachim Trier only really working right in his section of the globe. Same thing with Panahi, same thing with Kleber. Right. And so maybe that was a factor that we saw here, that maybe we've been sort of led to believe that they're this group of voters, this branch of voters that are really have wide open arms to welcoming multiple international directors. But maybe we've taken for granted that some of these international directors have a strong foothold in American cinema, right? And in English language cinema.
Right. And I think the other thing to mention is that Chloé Zhao makes the feat of being able to get her second directorial nomination in the shortest amount of time than any other female filmmaker who's been there. I think it's only been Jane Campion, I believe.
Yeah.
And so she's able to accomplish that, I think, in large part because I think where we are at the Academy right now, I just think that voters, spectators are not thrilled with the idea of if there is a strong female filmmaker in contention, snubbing her.
Yeah, so this is sort of like,
I think it's important to have that inclusion.
So isn't that sort of the narrative that we're revisiting from 2012 and Catherine Bigelow and the backlash for Hurt Locker, right? And so whatever mechanism existed that kept her off that list, the branch has sort of moved forward, right, and sort of said that that mechanism should not exist.
Right.
And so we're not going to let that factor in to sidelining Chloé Zhao.
100%.
Right.
And I think that's what we saw here. It was the Gold Derby 5. The favorites.
Right. And it was of the DGA, I believe it was 4 from the DGA.
Right, minus Guillermo del Toro and for the BAFTA.
And so the BAFTA nominees were Paul Thomas Anderson for One Battle After Another, Ryan Coogler for Sinners, Josh Safdie for Marty Supreme, Chloé Zhao for Hamnet, Joachim Trier for Sentimental Value, and lastly, Yorgos Lanthimos for Begonia. Begonia had a pretty good day at BAFTA, which probably would have tipped us off into the last category that we have to talk about, which is Best Picture. So what's
up? The nominees for Best Picture are Begonia, F1, Frankenstein, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, One Battle After Another, The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, Sinners, and Train Dreams. And I believe I'm not mistaken when I say it's the PGA 10.
It's the PGA 10. And so no one really dug a little too deeply for Nickel Boys to get in there. Of course, the Nickel Boys team was even in here with F1. So
Plan B still got in again.
Plan B got in for the least Plan B of movies since Beetlejuice. Kind of wonder why Beetlejuice didn't maybe wasn't a bigger factor here. But so yeah, it is the PGA 10, which is anticlimactic in my opinion. There is no Neon 5, there is no Neon 4 or Neon 3 on this list. There's
just a bunch of 2s.
A Neon 2.
There's a bunch of 2s.
Yes, there's a bunch of 2s.
2 Focus Features,
the
2
Neon 2,
2 Netflix.
The Focus Features 2, the Warner Brothers 2.
Warner Brothers 2.
Yeah, I don't think it's a terrible list. I do believe it's anticlimactic. I think does F1 have to be there? Second time a Joseph Kosinski film gets nominated for Best Picture. We're definitely blazing the path for Joseph Kosinski to be nominated for Best Director at some point.
100%.
Let's hope it's for a worthwhile film. I'm not a big fan of Top Gun Maverick, as I've told you, and I love Top Gun. And I'm not a big fan of F1, to be perfectly honest. And I did not like Days of Thunder. So at the same time, I do think it's the least of the Plan B films to ever be nominated for Best Picture. What else is notable? I mean, Bugonia got in.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm happy about that because I love Bugonia. It's one of my favorite films, but I did not expect it to get in.
Yes. Even though maybe the BAFTA would have tipped you off a little
100%.
bit. Even though some directors, I remember when they nominated Tom Ford for Nocturnal Animals, I think for the BAFTA, which is a film that I love.
Right.
And it didn't get nominated for, I think, one nomination at the Oscars. So no top position in Best Picture. As we already said, it was a historical day for One Battle and for Sinners. Train Dreams is able to get that nomination. The Secret Agent is one of the two foreign films nominated, both of them from Neon. I don't know. I think part of it is the Brazilian moment that's happening right now in cinema, right?
Yeah.
Between this year and I'm Still Here.
Yeah.
I think that gives it the last little push of momentum. I mean, what are the odds? We have here our movie with 9 nominations, I believe, Sentimental Value, and then we have the 4 nominations for The Secret Agent. So we definitely know that if this was any other year or if Brazil wasn't having a moment right now, probably the first film on the chopping block is The Secret Agent,
Maybe.
I think, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I agree with you. It is anticlimactic. There are some great films here. I don't know. You know, it's a little disappointing because we had in our head what it could have been.
Yes.
With 4 Neon films making the list.
And the quality of the Neon films too, right?
100%. That would have been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, it's not a bad list. I have my favorites, those being One Battle, Sentimental Value, The Secret Agent, and Bugonia are my favorite films from the list. Yours?
I mean, I definitely have one film that I think is above all the others, and then one film that I think really demonstrated what the industry can do in Sinners. And then I have one film that is just I can't believe that this film got nominated, and that's F1.
Right,
and I feel like
I think a lot of people share that feeling.
I feel like there's going to be so many worthwhile Plan B films from this point into the future for the next 5 years that are going to pay for this nomination for F1.
And I think everything comes full circle because we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast yet again that, you know, this machine starts early and it just piles through. And Apple, from the very beginning, you know, of the year, they said, we're going to make F1 a hit.
Yeah.
And we're going to get nominated for Best Picture because it's going to make a buttload of money.
And there was a bunch of pundits who bought into it and placed it there. And it just makes to me the whole thing like absurd. And to me, it's like, what's the point if we're going to like, I don't know.
It's all, to me, it feels like predestined.
Yeah.
You know, it takes away the magic a little bit because it's, you know, it's predestined to be a certain thing. And you get the thing that, you know, you kind of, it's the thing that it was always set out to be.
And you can't really back it up, can you? Because like, here's where I feel like not enough people are talking about it. I don't think Top Gun Maverick was predestined. I feel like it was a genuine hit.
I can see that.
That sort of, you know, it became a phenomenon and it took over. Okay. Maybe part of this nomination is some leftover resentment that Top Gun Maverick didn't win Best Picture. I have no idea. But F1 did not make Top Gun Maverick money.
No.
Not at all.
No.
Not at the US, not at the global level. I'm not saying it didn't make money. It made an impressive amount of money. It just made nowhere near Top Gun Maverick money. And so to me, it also sort of like waters down the achievement that Top Gun Maverick had by breaking into this category anyway.
Right.
And so to also realize that, you know, look at everything that Top Gun Maverick accomplished, including getting nominated for screenplay. Of all things, F1 couldn't do that, but it could still get a Best Picture nomination.
It feels very like, it almost feels like cut and paste.
Yeah.
For in general, but also Ford v Ferrari.
Yeah.
You know, race movie.
Yeah.
Gets 2 sound nominations and editing and picture.
And again, I mean, Top Gun Maverick is not about racing, but I'm saying of the 3 films, Ford v Ferrari is the best screenplay between the 3 of them, and it did not get nominated for screenplay. Right. But F1, exactly, near the F1, rightly so. I mean, the screenplay is not good. But F1 for all the it made more money internationally than domestically by far. And with all that, it couldn't even really make the BAFTA long list for Best Picture.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I just really don't know who was passionate enough to put this movie in the top 10
like
besides someone who simply did not watch enough movies or does not take enough movies seriously.
I think that's the answer. I think the answer is, and again, and we learn this every year, the bittersweet revelation of, who this Academy is.
Right.
If I have to choose between F1 and a foreign language film, I don't want to see foreign films. I don't want to see too many of them here. I don't want to see subtitles when I watch films.
Right.
I'm going to pick F1.
Yeah.
I might not pick Avatar and Wicked, but I'll still pick F1 over no other choice.
Right.
I'll pick F1 over it was just an accident.
Right.
And it's disappointing.
But I will say, like, if you're a voter and you decided, yeah, I guess I'm going to pick F1, I would really love to have that voter, sit in front of an audience and explain why that vote went to F1 and not Weapons, both films that made the PGA 10. So I believe the one film to get screwed out of the PGA 10, because it's not exactly the list, is Weapons gets screwed out for The Secret Agent.
That's right.
And I understand why The Secret Agent is able to edge it out. My question is, so why F1 and not Weapons?
Right.
Is it only because we can't take the genre seriously?
Yes. Right.
Is it because it didn't make as much money internationally? Because relative to the expense, it might have done better.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe because you feel like I really need a movie on there that's a tentpole movie that I'm advertising on McDonald's and at a sporting event, and Weapons is not that movie. Even though you could have done a really mean crossover with Wendy's and Weapons. But so to me, that's the part that's kind of annoying and disappointing.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. It's a mixed bag. It always is. Some highlights, some lowlights.
Yeah.
That's the way it is every year. But still, this is still the funner part of this whole awards race. Now we get to the more boring part. Is anyone really doubting that Jessie Buckley is going to win Best Actress? I mean, that's crazy. I think, is anyone doubting that Stellan Skarsgård is going to win for Sentimental Value? I think that's crazy. I know some people are going to say possibly, but guys, it's going to be Stellan Skarsgård.
Let's just hope that the award ceremonies at, for example, the SAG maybe can make things a little bit interesting with a win for Wound Me or maybe a win for Benicio. But other than that, I think you're right. This next phase is really between one or two people. And we'll see if anything interesting develops. I mean, I will say that phase two is never without its own kind of little bubbles of excitement.
I will say, but we also did we mention the BAFTA 5?
For Best Picture?
Yeah.
Well, the BAFTA 5 for Best Picture were the DGA 5, sub out Frankenstein, which had a terrible day, and put in Sentimental Value.
Right.
And again, that would have been a tip-off that sort of backed up the PGA 10 nomination for Sentimental Value. And so it would have really, I think, affirmed that it was going to do well here.
That Sentimental Value is a top 5 film.
Yeah. I think the other thing to sort of learn from here is that for the most part, if you're an international film that does not do well at BAFTA, it's going to be very hard to capitalize and then do well at the Oscars. Yeah. I think Secret Agents is able to do it, but only Secret Agent.
Right.
It was just an accident. It's not able to do it, and certainly not Sarat. But, again, phase two is now without its little moments of excitement or interesting turns. And as we're recording this episode, there's a little bit of discussion online about some controversy and revelation as to the rift that perhaps played the rift between the Safdie brothers and where it may have originated from. And we won't get into it into this episode, but we'll be monitoring it as the story develops. And if it becomes something to discuss as it pertains to Oscar nominations and outcomes, we'll be revisiting it.
Certainly, it has the potential of derailing certain campaigns.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, if anyone covering this is itching for Carlos Sofia Gascon, Fernando Torres sort of controversial moment, this may be it. So we'll see if this has legs.
100%. I'm curious to see what happens there. If you haven't heard about the story, check it out. We'll talk about more on our next podcast. And that's it for this episode.
Yeah.
And it's been really nice to have this deep dive with all of you. Thank you for joining us on this journey of phase one.
And we look forward to phase two.
We look forward to phase two. And as always, it's been a pleasure.
If you've been enjoying the Academy Anonymous podcast and want to support the work we're doing, there's a voluntary support link in the show notes. Totally optional. Just a way to help us keep the podcast going. Thank you for listening.
The music on this episode, entitled Cool Cats, was graciously provided by Kevin MacLeod and Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. https://creativecommons.org/licenses/by/3.0.
Disclaimer. The Academy Anonymous podcast is in no way affiliated or endorsed by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. If you've been enjoying the Academy Anonymous podcast and want to support the work we're doing, there's a voluntary support link in the show notes. Totally optional. Just a way to help us keep the podcast going. Thank you for listening.
The music on this episode, entitled Cool Cats, was graciously provided by Kevin MacLeod and Incompetech.com.